Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into one of history's darkest chapters, where a simple birthmark could seal your fate, where brewing your family's daily ale might cost you your life, and where being a little too good at predicting rain could literally get you burned alive. You're about to discover 15 chilling reasons why you'd be branded a witch in medieval times, plus some bonus terrors that'll make you grateful for our modern world. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for, about why certain superstitions still linger in our culture today. So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, or maybe leave a comment below, but make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. I'd love to know where and when you started watching this video, or perhaps you could share what you think about these historical mysteries. Now, let's keep the lights as soft as possible. Turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You wake up in medieval Europe, perhaps around 1450, and you notice a peculiar mark on your skin, maybe a dark mole shaped like a crescent moon, or a birthmark that resembles what nervous neighbors might call a devil's claw. In our modern world, you'd barely give it a second thought, but here, in this time of superstition and fear, that innocent mark on your body has just become your potential death sentence. Strange birthmarks were considered among the most damning evidence of witchcraft, and you could almost feel the suspicious glances burning into your skin as you realize what this means. The witch hunters called these marks devil's marks or witches' teats, believing they were places where Satan himself had touched you, marking you as his own, or spots where you fed your demonic familiars with your own blood. You shiver as you understand that what modern medicine explains as simple genetic variations or minor skin conditions, medieval minds interpreted as supernatural branding. The logic, if you can call it that, was terrifyingly simple. God created humans in his perfect image, so any deviation from perceived normalcy must be the devil's work. Your birthmark wasn't just a mark. It was evidence that you'd made a pact with Satan, possibly before you were even born. Historians still argue whether these beliefs originated from genuine religious terror, or from more practical desires to eliminate social outcasts and seize their property. You discover that professional witch hunters, those traveling specialists in supernatural detection, had detailed catalogues of suspicious markings. A mole near your eye might suggest you could cast the evil eye. A birthmark on your hand could indicate you'd signed Satan's book with that very finger. Even beauty marks, those tiny spots that Renaissance ladies would later paint on for fashion, could become evidence of your corruption. The examination process itself was a nightmare you can barely imagine. Accused women were stripped naked and examined by appointed officials, usually men, who searched every inch of skin for these telltale marks. They used pins and needles to test whether the marks were sensitive. If you felt pain, you might be innocent. But if you felt nothing, perhaps from shock or trauma, this proved the mark was supernatural. You realize with horror that this created an impossible situation. Feeling pain or not feeling pain could both be used as evidence against you. What makes this even more chilling is how birthmarks often run in families. You understand that if your mother had been accused of witchcraft because of her unusual markings, you'd automatically be suspect too. Witchcraft was believed to be hereditary, passed down through bloodlines like eye color or height. Your very DNA could be considered cursed. The paranoia extended beyond obvious birthmarks to any unusual skin condition. Warts, scars, even temporary bruises could all be interpreted as supernatural signs. You imagine how a simple accident that left you with an oddly shaped bruise could suddenly transform you from respected neighbor to suspected devil worshipper overnight. The line between normal and supernatural was drawn not by evidence or logic, but by fear and superstition. Interestingly, not all cultures viewed unusual birthmarks with such terror. In some ancient traditions, distinctive birthmarks were considered signs of divine favor or indicators of a person's destiny. But medieval Christian Europe had developed an almost pathological fear of anything that deviated from their narrow definition of godly normalcy. You can almost feel the weight of constantly hiding your skin, always covering up, never letting anyone see what natural variations your body might display. Swimming becomes impossible. Not that medieval people did much recreational swimming anyway. Even intimate relationships become fraught with danger, as a lover might discover your marks and either abandon you in fear or worse, report you to authorities. The tragedy is that many people bore these marks with pride in earlier times. Celtic cultures, for instance, often viewed unusual birthmarks as signs of connection to the other world, not evil, but magical in positive ways. Vikings sometimes interpreted certain marks as indicators of a person's future achievements or divine protection. But in medieval Europe, you realize that your body has become a canvas where others read stories of evil and corruption, regardless of who you actually are inside. Your character, your actions, your faith. None of it matters as much as the accident of how your skin happened to form in your mother's womb. You understand viscerally how appearance-based prejudice could literally become a matter of life and death, and how society's fear of the unusual could transform innocent people into scapegoats for everything from bad harvests to mysterious illnesses. As you run your fingers over that imaginary birthmark, you begin to comprehend just how precarious life could be when superstition ruled over reason, when fear overcame compassion, and when being different could mean being dead. You glance around your small dwelling and notice something that would seem perfectly normal to modern eyes, but marks you as deeply suspicious in medieval society. You live alone, as a woman without a husband, father, or male guardian hovering nearby. You've just committed what many consider the most dangerous act possible in this era, existing independently. The medieval world operated on a rigid belief that women required constant male supervision, not just for protection, but for moral guidance. You feel the weight of their stares as neighbors whisper that any woman living alone must be up to something sinister. After all, what godly woman would choose solitude over the proper protection of marriage or family? In their minds, your independence isn't empowerment, it's evidence of corruption. You discover that the church taught that women were inherently weaker vessels, more susceptible to Satan's temptations. Without a man's spiritual authority to guide you, you are believed to be wandering in moral darkness, vulnerable to every demonic whisper. Your solitude becomes proof that you've rejected God's natural order, and rejecting divine order was the first step toward witchcraft. The practical reasons for your single status matter little to your suspicious neighbors. Perhaps your husband died in one of the endless wars or plagues that swept through medieval Europe. Maybe you never married because no suitable matches were arranged, or because you were too poor to attract suitors. Historians still argue whether the high number of single women accused of witchcraft reflected genuine belief in their supernatural dangerousness, or simply society's desire to eliminate economic burdens and redistribute their property. You realize that living alone forces you into an impossible situation regarding your daily survival. You must work to feed yourself, but women's work was severely limited and often viewed with suspicion. If you're too successful at supporting yourself, neighbors wonder what supernatural help you're receiving. If you struggle and appear poor, they assume you're being punished for your sins. There's no winning position for a woman existing outside male protection. The economics of your situation become particularly dangerous during hard times. When crops fail or disease strikes, communities look for scapegoats, and you, the woman who doesn't fit their social structures, doesn't become an obvious target. Your independence makes you an outsider, and outsiders are always the first suspects when misfortune strikes. You can almost feel how your neighbor's initial indifference gradually transforms into suspicion, then fear, then outright hostility. Your dwelling itself becomes evidence against you. Living alone means you have privacy, and privacy meant opportunities for secret activities. What are you doing in there with no one to witness your behavior? Surely you must be mixing potions, casting spells, or entertaining demonic visitors. The very walls that should provide comfort become prison bars in the court of public opinion. You understand that even your daily routines appear sinister through their eyes. Talking to yourself as you work, a perfectly normal behavior for someone living in solitude, becomes evidence that you're conversing with invisible demons. Staying up late reading by candlelight, if you're literate, suggests you're studying forbidden texts. Even keeping unusual hours because you have no one else's schedule to accommodate becomes proof of supernatural activities. The legal system offers you little protection. In most medieval courts, a woman's testimony carried less weight than a man's, and your status as an independent woman further diminished your credibility. You lacked the social connections that might protect you. No husband's family to defend your reputation. No male relatives to vouch for your character. You're legally and socially vulnerable in ways that married women, despite their own restrictions, are not. What makes this particularly tragic is that many women living alone were actually widows who'd lost their husbands to war, disease, or accident. These women often possessed valuable skills, healing knowledge passed down through generations, brewing techniques, textile expertise, that made them economically viable but socially suspect. Your grandmother's recipes for treating illnesses or your mother's methods for preserving food could easily be reinterpreted as magical formulas when viewed through the lens of suspicion. You notice how other women in the community treat you differently too. Married women might pity you, but they also fear association with someone so clearly outside social norms. They worry that befriending you might cast suspicion on their own godliness. This isolation feeds on itself, making you more alone and therefore more suspicious with each passing day. The irony cuts deep when you realize that some of the most accomplished and intelligent women of the era often lived alone by necessity or choice. Herbalists, midwives, brewsters, and textile workers frequently operated independent businesses, but their very competence and independence made them targets. Success without visible male support suggested supernatural assistance. Surely no mere woman could prosper alone through natural means. You can almost taste the bitter irony that the same society that created economic conditions, forcing women to live independently, then punished them for that independence. Wars killed husbands, plagues destroyed families, and economic hardship prevented marriages. Yet the women who survived these catastrophes face suspicion for their resilience. Even your age works against you. Young single women might still be considered marriageable, making them less threatening. But as an older single woman, you represent something unsettling. A female who's moved beyond reproductive usefulness while maintaining independence. Medieval minds struggled to categorize such women, and what couldn't be categorized was often labeled dangerous. The psychological weight of constant suspicion bears down on you. Every interaction becomes a performance where you must prove your normalcy and godliness. You modify your behavior, your speech, even your expressions to appear less threatening. But this very caution can be interpreted as evidence that you're hiding something, creating a paranoia spiral that becomes increasingly difficult to escape. As you sit in your solitary dwelling, you understand viscerally how independence, something we celebrate today, could become a death sentence in an era where conformity to rigid social structures wasn't just expected, but required for survival. You carefully tend your small garden of herbs, your fingers gentle as they brush against leaves that could heal a child's fever or ease an old woman's aching joints. The irony isn't lost on you that the same knowledge that makes you invaluable to your community during times of sickness could also make you a candidate for execution when fear overtakes reason. Your expertise in herbal medicine, passed down through generations of wise women, has become a double-edged sword in this age of suspicion. The medieval world desperately needed healers like you. With physicians scarce and expensive, most people relied on local wise women who understood which plants could treat common ailments. You know that willow bark can reduce pain and fever, that chamomile soothes upset stomachs, and that certain mushrooms can ease the agony of difficult childbirths. But this knowledge, once revered as godly wisdom, now carries the taint of potential witchcraft. You feel the weight of centuries-old tradition on your shoulders. Your grandmother taught your mother, who taught you, creating an unbroken chain of healing knowledge that predates Christianity in these lands. But the church increasingly viewed such traditional practices with suspicion, especially when they worked better than official prayers and holy water. Your success at healing becomes evidence against you. Surely only supernatural powers could make your remedies so effective. The transformation in attitudes didn't happen overnight. Early Christian authorities often embraced herbalism as part of God's natural bounty, believing that divine providence provided plants specifically for human healing. Monasteries maintained extensive herb gardens, and monks were often the most skilled healers in their communities. But as the medieval period progressed and witch hunting fever intensified, the line between godly healing and demonic magic became increasingly blurred. You discover that your knowledge makes you dangerous because it gives you power over life and death. When you successfully treat a sick child, grateful parents praise your skill. But when, despite your best efforts, a patient dies, whispers begin about whether you deliberately caused the death through malicious magic. The same herbs that heal can also harm when used incorrectly, and this dual nature feeds suspicions about your true intentions. Historians still argue whether the persecution of wise women represented genuine religious concern or a deliberate attempt by male-dominated medical institutions to eliminate competition. As formal medical training became more established in universities, institutions that excluded women, traditional healers increasingly found their methods questioned and their motivation suspect. Your collection of dried herbs hanging from your ceiling rafters tells a story of careful preparation and seasonal gathering. But to suspicious eyes, they look like the ingredients for sinister potions. That jar of powdered foxglove that can regulate heart rhythms in tiny doses, but kill in larger amounts, becomes evidence of your ability to poison enemies. The mandrake root you use for pain relief carries ancient associations with magic and the supernatural that overshadow its legitimate medical properties. The timing of your herb gathering also works against you. You know that many plants are most potent when harvested at specific times. Some work best when picked before dawn, others during the full moon when their active compounds are concentrated. But these optimal gathering times align suspiciously with traditional magical practices. Your practical knowledge of plant biochemistry appears indistinguishable from supernatural ritual to those who don't understand the science behind your methods. You realize that even your diagnostic skills become suspect. Your ability to examine a patient's complexion, feel their pulse, and observe their symptoms to determine the right treatment looks like divination to those unfamiliar with medical observation. When you correctly predict that a fever will break in 3 days, or warn that a wound might become infected, your accuracy suggests supernatural foresight rather than experienced judgment. The gendered nature of this persecution becomes clear as you notice that male herbalists face less suspicion than their female counterparts. When monks or male physicians use the same plants and techniques, their work is more likely to be seen as learned practice rather than witchcraft. Your gender makes your knowledge appear more threatening, more likely to be derived from demonic sources rather than scholarly study. Your recipes and formulas, carefully recorded or memorized, become evidence of spellbooks and magical incantations. The Latin names you might know for various plants sound like foreign incantations to ears unfamiliar with scientific nomenclature. Even your method of mixing ingredients, stirring clockwise or counterclockwise based on what works best for different preparations, can be interpreted as ritual magic rather than practical technique. The isolation required for your work compounds the suspicion. Gathering herbs often means venturing into forests and fields alone, particularly at dawn or dusk when plants are most potent. These solitary journeys to liminal spaces, the edges between civilization and wilderness, the boundaries between day and night, align perfectly with folkloric descriptions of witches' activities. You can almost feel the paranoia building as successful treatments become evidence of supernatural aid. While failures suggest malicious intent, there's no safe middle ground where your natural healing abilities can exist without suspicion. Even teaching others your knowledge becomes dangerous. As it suggests, you're spreading witchcraft rather than sharing beneficial wisdom. The tragic irony weighs heavily on your heart. Communities desperately needed healers, yet they simultaneously feared and persecuted the very people who possessed the knowledge to help them. Your genuine desire to ease suffering and save lives could be twisted into evidence of a pact with evil forces, making compassion itself a dangerous emotion to display too openly. Do you remember those strange birthmarks we discussed earlier? Now imagine combining that physical evidence with your knowledge of healing herbs. The combination creates what witch hunters would consider an almost irrefutable case against you. Your body bears Satan's mark, and your mind contains his secrets. A deadly combination in an age where fear overwhelmed reason and superstition triumphed over science. As you carefully store your healing herbs away from prying eyes, you understand that knowledge itself has become a form of contraband, and your greatest gift to humanity might ultimately become your doom. You stroke the soft black fur of your feline companion as she purrs contentedly in your lap, unaware that her very presence in your home has just multiplied your chances of being accused of witchcraft by a factor that would terrify any mathematician of the era. That innocent creature whose only crimes are catching mice and seeking warm spots by your fire has become, in the eyes of medieval society, a demonic familiar sent directly from the depths of hell to assist you in your supernatural endeavors. The transformation of cats from revered creatures to objects of suspicion tells a fascinating story of how quickly cultural attitudes can shift. Ancient Egyptians worshipped cats as sacred beings, and early medieval Christians initially saw them as useful creatures blessed by God to protect grain stores from vermin. But somewhere in the twisted logic of witch-hunting fever, cats, particularly black ones, became associated with the devil himself. You discover that the color of your cat's fur carries enormous significance in this superstitious age. Black cats, once considered especially lucky in many cultures, now represent the ultimate symbol of evil. The reasoning follows medieval Christianity's tendency to associate darkness with sin and light with purity. Your black cat's sleek coat becomes visual proof of her connection to the Prince of Darkness, while her nocturnal habits align perfectly with the supposed timing of witches' activities. The Church's complicated relationship with cats contributed significantly to their demonization. Pope Gregory IX's papal bull Vox in Rama in 1233 officially condemned cats as instruments of Satan worship, describing them as creatures that devil worshippers kissed in obscene rituals. This papal proclamation gave official sanction to fears that had been brewing in popular culture, transforming local superstitions into religious doctrine. Your cat's behavior, perfectly natural to modern understanding, appears supernatural to medieval minds. Her ability to see in darkness suggests she navigates the shadow realm where demons dwell. When she stares intently at empty corners, you know she's watching for mice or responding to sounds you can't hear. But your neighbors interpret this as communication with invisible evil spirits. Her independence and refusal to obey commands like dogs do makes her seem willful and rebellious, qualities associated with Satan's nature. You realize that your relationship with your cat provides compelling evidence for those seeking to prove your witchcraft. The concept of familiar spirits, demons that took animal form to assist witches, became central to witch-hunting theology. Your cat's affection toward you, her tendency to follow you around the house, and her apparent responsiveness to your moods all suggest supernatural communication to suspicious observers. Historians still argue whether the persecution of cats represented genuine religious belief or served more practical purposes, such as eliminating competition from independent women who often kept cats for pest control. Single women with cats became particularly suspect because the animals suggested both independence and possible supernatural assistance in maintaining that independence. The timing of your cat's activities works against both of you. Cats are naturally crepuscular, most active during dawn and dusk, precisely the times when witches were believed to practice their craft. When your cat disappears for hours during the day, sleeping in hidden spots as cats naturally do, neighbors assume she's traveling to the spirit realm to report on your activities to demonic masters. Your cat's hunting prowess becomes twisted into evidence of supernatural abilities. Her skill at catching mice and birds suggests she possesses powers beyond normal animals. When she brings you dead prey as gifts, a natural feline behavior showing affection, suspicious minds interpret this as offerings for magical rituals. Even her ability to land on her feet when falling appears supernatural to people who don't understand basic physics. The medieval mind struggled with cats' apparent psychic abilities. Your cat seems to know when storms are coming, appearing restless before weather changes that humans can't yet detect. She avoids certain people who later prove untrustworthy, and shows affection toward those who turn out to be genuinely kind. Modern science explains these abilities through superior senses and behavioral observation, but medieval explanations defaulted to supernatural intervention. You notice how your cat's presence affects visitors to your home. some people immediately feel uncomfortable around her, interpreting their discomfort as spiritual recognition of evil rather than simple personal preference or cat allergies. Others find her unusually charming and friendly, which gets interpreted as evidence that she's casting spells to make people like you more. There's literally no way for your cat to behave that won't be seen as suspicious by those already convinced of her supernatural nature. The maternal behavior of female cats becomes particularly problematic. If your cat has kittens, the fierce protectiveness she shows toward her babies appears demonic to those who believe motherhood should be gentle and submissive. Her willingness to fight off much larger threats to defend her young suggests supernatural strength and courage that no ordinary animal should possess. Even your cat's cleanliness works against her. Her fastidious grooming habits, licking herself clean multiple times daily, can be interpreted as ritual purification or the removal of evidence after nocturnal supernatural activities. The fact that cats instinctively bury their waste suggests they're naturally secretive and deceptive, qualities medieval minds associated with servants of Satan. You can almost feel the weight of your neighbor's stares when you're seen talking to your cat. In an era when many people believed animals couldn't truly understand human speech, your conversations with your pet suggest you're giving her instructions for supernatural missions. Her responses, purring, meowing, rubbing against you, appear to be detailed reports of completed tasks rather than simple expressions of feline affection. The mathematical precision of witch hunting logic becomes apparent as you realize that owning any cat makes you suspect. But owning a black cat makes you almost certainly guilty in many minds. The combination of your gender, your independence, your herbal knowledge, and now your feline companion creates what prosecutors would consider an overwhelming case against you. Do you remember that birthmark we discussed, and your dangerous knowledge of healing herbs? Add a black cat to that mixture, and you've created what medieval witch hunters would consider the perfect supernatural storm. Your loyal companion, who asks for nothing more than food, shelter, and the occasional chin scratch, has unknowingly become a key witness in the case against your life. As your cat purrs peacefully in your lap, blissfully unaware of the danger she represents, you understand how even the most innocent relationships can be weaponized by fear and superstition. You catch a glimpse of your reflection in a bucket of water and see the cascade of red hair that frames your face. That beautiful, fiery mane that your mother always said made you look like a sunset goddess. But in medieval Europe, your gorgeous auburn locks have just painted a target on your back larger than any birthmark or black cat could create. Your hair color, determined by nothing more than genetic lottery, has become a blazing advertisement for your supposed connection to the fires of hell itself. The association between red hair and evil runs so deep in medieval culture that you can practically feel the suspicious stares burning into your scalp whenever you venture into public. Church teachings have twisted the natural beauty of red hair into something sinister, claiming that Judas Iscariot himself possessed fiery locks when he betrayed Christ. Your hair color becomes genealogical evidence that you share bloodline with history's most famous traitor. Carrying his corruption in your very follicles, you discover that medieval medical theory provided seemingly scientific backing for this prejudice. The dominant medical philosophy taught that red hair indicated an excess of hot, choleric humors in the body, the same imbalance that supposedly caused violent tempers, sexual promiscuity, and susceptibility to demonic influence. Your hair color becomes a diagnostic tool suggesting your entire personality and moral character, regardless of how you actually behave. The Celtic and Germanic populations of medieval Europe included many redheads, creating an unfortunate overlap between ethnic prejudice and supernatural suspicion. As Christianity spread through these regions, converting populations that had previously celebrated red hair as a sign of divine favor or warrior spirit. The new religion systematically demonized many traditional symbols. Your ancestors' proud heritage becomes your dangerous liability. You realize that literature and folklore compound your predicament. Medieval stories consistently portrayed red-headed characters as treacherous, lustful, or connected to otherworldly powers. The few positive red-headed characters in literature were usually supernatural beings themselves, fairies, spirits, or otherworldly creatures whose very nature confirmed the connection between red hair and the supernatural realm. Historians still argue whether anti-redhead sentiment represented genuine theological concern or provided convenient justification for persecution of Celtic and Germanic populations during Christian expansion. The timing of increased suspicion toward red hair coincides suspiciously with political conflicts between various European ethnic groups. Your daily life becomes a constant performance of trying to prove your normalcy, despite your conspicuous hair color. You wrap your head in scarves and veils more thoroughly than other women, always ensuring that no rebellious strand escapes to catch the light and remind observers of your difference. But even hidden, your red hair creates problems. The very act of concealing it so carefully suggests you're aware of its sinister implications. The seasonal changes in your hair color work against you in ways that blonde or brunette women never experience. In summer, exposure to sunlight brightens your red locks to brilliant copper, while winter might deepen them to auburn or even appear brownish in dim light. This natural variation gets interpreted as evidence of supernatural shape-shifting abilities, suggesting you can alter your appearance through magical means. You notice how your hair color affects people's memory and testimony about you. Red hair is distinctive and memorable, making you easy to identify and witness accounts. When something goes wrong in your community, people remember seeing the red-haired woman near the scene. Even if dozens of other people were present, your conspicuous appearance makes you a convenient scapegoat for any mysterious occurrence. The genetic rarity of red hair works both for and against you. In populations where red hair is extremely uncommon, you might be seen as so unusual that you're clearly marked by supernatural forces. But in Celtic regions where red hair is more frequent, you face different dangers. Suspicion that your entire family line carries cursed blood, making you part of a hereditary witching tradition. Your hair's texture and behavior add to the supernatural theories surrounding you. Red hair is often coarser and more unruly than other colors, requiring different care and styling techniques. When humidity makes your hair frizz or curl unpredictably, observers interpret this as your locks responding to atmospheric spiritual energy. When static electricity makes your hair stand up in dry weather, it appears to be moving through supernatural force. The medieval fascination with bodily correspondence means your red hair predicts other physical characteristics that increase suspicion. Red hair often accompanies pale skin that burns easily, creating a complexion that looks unhealthy to medieval eyes accustomed to sun-darkened working people. Your freckles become additional marks of supernatural influence, while your light-colored eyes seem to pierce souls with unnatural intensity. You can almost feel how your hair color influences the interpretation of your every action. When you display normal human emotions, anger, passion, joy, or sadness, observers attribute extra intensity to these feelings because of your red hair. Your supposed fiery temperament means that any emotion you express appears more dangerous and less controlled than the same feelings displayed by brown-haired neighbors. The connection between red hair and sexuality creates additional problems in a culture already suspicious of female sexuality. Medieval minds associated red hair with uncontrolled sexual appetite, assuming that red-headed women were more likely to seduce men or engage in immoral behavior. Your hair color becomes evidence of lustful nature, and lustful nature was considered a pathway to demonic corruption. Even your relationship with fire itself becomes suspect. When you tend your cooking hearth or light candles, observers note how naturally the flames seem to respond to your presence. Red hair and fire share the same color spectrum, creating visual associations that suggest supernatural affinity. Your ability to build good fires or keep flames burning steadily appears to be magical communication with elemental forces. The children in your community learn early to fear and avoid redheads, as their parents pass down generations of superstition about your hair color. You watch them point and whisper when they see you, already absorbing the prejudices that will make them suspicious of redheads throughout their lives. The cycle of discrimination perpetuates itself through each generation. Do you remember your herbal knowledge, your black cat, and that suspicious birthmark? Now, add your flaming red hair to this collection of evidence, and you can almost hear the whispers growing louder. the suspicions hardening into certainty. Your beautiful hair, which should be celebrated as nature's artistry, has become a beacon attracting the most dangerous kind of attention in an age where being different could mean being dead. As you carefully tuck every strand of red hair beneath your head covering, you understand that even your most basic physical characteristics have been weaponized against you by fear and prejudice. You reach for your needle with your left hand, the motion feeling as natural as breathing, but the moment your fingers grip the tool, you realize you've just committed what medieval society considers a literally sinister act. The word sinister itself comes from the Latin word for left, and in this age of rigid symbolism and religious interpretation, your left-handedness marks you as fundamentally wrong, spiritually corrupted, and quite possibly in league with the devil himself. The medieval Christian worldview divided the universe into perfect cosmic symmetries, good versus evil, light versus dark, God's right hand versus Satan's left. You discover that your natural tendency to favor your left hand places you firmly on the wrong side of this spiritual equation, making every gesture you make a potential declaration of allegiance to darkness. When you cross yourself or reach for holy objects with your left hand, observers interpret this as mockery or corruption of sacred rituals. You feel the weight of biblical interpretation crushing down on your simple preference for left-handed motion. Scripture repeatedly emphasizes God's right hand as the seat of power and blessing, while the left side becomes associated with judgment and damnation. When Jesus spoke of separating the sheep from the goats, he placed the blessed on his right side and the cursed on his left. Your dominant hand has literally placed you among the damned in the minds of medieval theologians. The practical challenges of being left-handed in a right-handed world compound your supernatural suspicions. Medieval tools, from agricultural implements to writing instruments, were designed for right-handed users. Your awkward adaptations to use these tools appear clumsy and unnatural, suggesting you're fighting against God's intended design for human beings. When you excel despite these obstacles, observers assume you're receiving supernatural assistance to overcome your natural disadvantage. You discover that medieval medical theory provided seemingly scientific explanations for left-handedness that only increased suspicion about your character. Physicians taught that right-handedness indicated proper balance of bodily humors, while left-handedness suggested corruption or disease affecting normal development. Your preference becomes a diagnostic symptom of internal spiritual or physical illness that might be contagious to others. Historians still argue whether persecution of left-handed individuals represented genuine religious conviction or served as a convenient marker for identifying social outsiders who could be easily scapegoated during times of crisis. The relatively rare occurrence of left-handedness, affecting roughly 10% of the population, made left-handed people visible minorities who stood out in ways that invited suspicion. Your writing becomes particularly problematic when you're literate enough to own books or create documents. Medieval scripts were designed for right-handed writers, flowing from left to right in ways that left-handed writers naturally smudge and distort. Your handwriting looks different, more labored, sometimes even appearing to slant in unnatural directions. These visual differences in your script suggest you might be writing in magical alphabets or encoding supernatural messages. The dining rituals of medieval society create daily opportunities for your left-handedness to appear sinister. When you reach for bread with your left hand during communal meals, you're symbolically reaching with Satan's hand toward Christ's body. Your natural gestures during prayer, crossing yourself, reaching towards religious objects, or gesturing while speaking, all carry the wrong spiritual orientation when performed with your dominant left hand. You realize that even your domestic activities become evidence of supernatural corruption. When you stir cooking pots with your left hand, suspicious observers note whether you stir clockwise, following the sun's path and God's order, or counterclockwise, following the devil's backward way. Your natural stirring pattern, determined by hand dominance rather than spiritual allegiance, becomes analyzed for evidence of your true supernatural loyalties. The military implications of your left-handedness add another layer of suspicion. In sword fighting and warfare, left-handed fighters possess natural advantages because opponents expect right-handed attacks. Your success in physical confrontations appears supernatural to those who don't understand the tactical benefits of unexpected angles and unfamiliar defensive patterns. Victory achieved through left-handed fighting technique looks like demonic assistance to medieval minds. Your left-handedness affects how others interpret your every gesture and facial expression. When you point with your left hand, you're directing attention using Satan's preferred appendage. When you wave or gesture emphatically during conversation, the sinister nature of your dominant hand makes these movements appear threatening or corrupted. Even unconscious habits like scratching your nose or brushing hair from your face become suspect when performed with the wrong hand. The artistic and craft work you produce with your left hand carries visual markers that identify your handedness to trained observers. Your brushstrokes in painting, your stitching patterns in needlework, and your carving techniques in woodworking all flow in directions that appear unnatural to right-handed viewers. These distinctive patterns in your creative work become signatures that identify you as left-handed, even when you're not present. You can almost feel how your left-handedness influences the interpretation of your other suspicious characteristics. That birthmark we discussed earlier becomes more sinister when you point to it with your left hand. Your herbal knowledge appears more demonic when you mix medicines with Satan's preferred appendage. Your red hair seems more fiery when you run your left hand through it. And your black cat appears more supernatural when you pet her with the devil's own hand. The social pressure to suppress your natural left-handedness creates its own problems. When you force yourself to use your right hand for important tasks, your performance appears clumsy and unnatural, suggesting you're uncomfortable with godly activities. But when you excel at tasks using your natural left hand, this success proves your supernatural abilities. Either way, your handedness works against you. The children around you learn early to fear and avoid left-handed gestures, with parents slapping small hands that reach with the wrong appendage. You watch as naturally left-handed children in your community are forced to convert to right-handed behavior through punishment and repetition, their natural preferences being literally beaten out of them for their spiritual safety. Even your sleep becomes suspect when observers notice which side you naturally favor for lying down, or which hand you unconsciously use to pull blankets over yourself during the night. Your most basic, unconscious behaviors carry spiritual implications that you never intended but cannot escape. As you deliberately switch your needle to your right hand and struggle through the awkward motions of forced dexterity, you understand how even the most fundamental aspects of your physical being have been transformed into evidence against your soul. You stand before your large wooden vats, watching the barley mash ferment and bubble with the mysterious alchemy that transforms simple grains into nourishing ale, unaware that this ancient feminine craft, brewing, has become one of the most dangerous activities a woman can practice in medieval Europe. Your expertise in creating the daily bread drink that sustains entire communities has somehow transformed from essential domestic skill into damning evidence of supernatural knowledge and possible witchcraft. The irony cuts deep when you realize that brewing was originally considered such a naturally feminine domain that men rarely involved themselves in the process. For centuries, women had been the acknowledged masters of fermentation, understanding the delicate balance of ingredients, timing, and temperature that creates good ale from basic grains. Your mothers and grandmothers passed down brewing secrets through generations, creating a feminine tradition of knowledge that predated Christianity and sustained entire civilizations. You discovered that the transformation of brewing from respected craft to suspicious activity happened gradually, as economic and social forces began reshaping medieval society. As brewing became more profitable and commercialized, male guild members started coveting what had always been women's territory. Your success as a brewer didn't just threaten social norms, it threatened economic competition from men who wanted to control this increasingly lucrative trade. The brewing process itself appears supernatural to those who don't understand the science of fermentation. You watch grain and water transform into an intoxicating beverage through what seems like magic, but is actually the work of wild yeasts converting sugars into alcohol. Your ability to predict when fermentation will complete, to know by smell and taste whether a batch is progressing correctly, and to adjust ingredients to create consistently good ale appears to require supernatural insight to observers unfamiliar with brewing chemistry. Your tools and ingredients become evidence of magical practice when viewed through suspicious eyes. The large cauldrons you use for heating water and boiling grains look exactly like the witches' cauldrons described in folklore. Your collection of herbs and spices, hops for preservation, various plants for flavoring, honey for sweetening, resembles an apothecary's magical ingredients more than a brewer's pantry to those seeking evidence of supernatural activities. Historians still argue whether the persecution of female brewers represented genuine concern about witchcraft or deliberate economic warfare designed to eliminate women from profitable brewing businesses. The timing of increased suspicion toward brewing women coincides suspiciously with the rise of male-dominated brewing guilds and the commercialization of ale production. You realize that your knowledge of fermentation timing aligns dangerously with supposed witching activities. Brewing requires attention at specific times, checking fermentation progress during dawn and dusk hours, adjusting temperatures at night when the air is cooler, and harvesting wild yeast during particular weather conditions. These practical necessities match exactly with the times when witches were believed to be most active, making your legitimate work schedule appear like a supernatural timetable. The intoxicating effects of your product create additional suspicion about your intentions. Ale and beer alter consciousness, loosening tongues and changing behavior in ways that medieval minds associated with supernatural influence. Your ability to create beverages that make people act differently suggests you possess power over human minds and souls. When men drink your ale and behave badly afterward, you become responsible for their moral corruption rather than their poor judgment. Your success at brewing creates the same impossible situation you've encountered before. Competence becomes evidence of supernatural assistance. When your ale tastes better than your neighbors, when your brewing consistently produces good results while others fail, when you rarely lose batches to spoilage or contamination, observers assume you're receiving demonic help rather than applying superior knowledge and technique. The communal nature of brewing adds another layer of suspicion to your activities. Brewing often required group effort, women helping each other during harvest time, sharing equipment and expertise, gathering together for the labor-intensive work of malting and fermenting. These gatherings of women working together on mysterious transformation processes looked exactly like descriptions of witches' covens in popular imagination. You notice how your brewing activities affect your relationship with the church. Alcohol had complicated religious implications, blessed as part of communion but condemned when it led to excess and sin. Your role as creator of intoxicating beverages places you in an ambiguous spiritual position, providing communion wine for religious ceremonies while also enabling the sinful behavior that drinking could encourage. The seasonal nature of brewing creates additional problems. The best brewing conditions occur during specific times of year when temperatures and humidity levels optimize fermentation. Your increased activity during these optimal brewing seasons, often coinciding with traditional harvest festivals and seasonal celebrations that the church was trying to suppress, makes your work appear connected to pagan ritual cycles rather than practical agricultural timing. Your brewing knowledge includes understanding of water quality, grain varieties, and preservation techniques that seem impossibly sophisticated to observers who don't share your expertise. Your ability to determine which water sources produce the best ale, to identify grain diseases that will ruin batches, and to predict how long different ales will remain drinkable appears to require supernatural foresight rather than accumulated experience and careful observation. The equipment modifications you make to improve your brewing process look like magical apparatus to unfamiliar eyes. Your innovations, better straining methods, improved fermentation vessels, techniques for controlling temperature, demonstrate creative problem-solving that medieval minds might attribute to demonic inspiration rather than human ingenuity. You can almost taste the bitterness of irony when you realize that communities desperately needed your brewing skills. Ale was safer to drink than water in many medieval locations, providing essential nutrition and calories, especially during winter months when fresh food was scarce. Yet the very people who depended on your product for survival simultaneously suspected you of using supernatural methods to create it. Do you remember your accumulating evidence? The birthmark, the solitary life, the herbal knowledge, the black cat, the red hair, the left-handedness? Now add your expertise at brewing, and you've created what medieval prosecutors would consider an almost perfect witch profile. Your ability to transform simple ingredients into complex, intoxicating beverages using knowledge passed down through generations of women becomes the final piece in a puzzle that spells doom. As you carefully tend your fermenting ale, monitoring the bubbling that means your batch is progressing correctly, you understand how expertise itself has become a form of evidence against you, and how the very skills that make you valuable to your community could ultimately destroy you. You stand at the edge of the river, your heart pounding as the crowd gathers behind you, their voices rising in a mixture of excitement and fear. The water trial awaits. That twisted logic of medieval justice that will determine your guilt or innocence through the simple act of whether you sink or float. You understand with crystalline clarity that you're facing an impossible choice: drown as an innocent person, or survive and be burned as a proven witch. The water that once brought life to your community has become an instrument of death disguised as divine judgment. The theological reasoning behind water trials reveals the medieval mind's desperate attempt to let God decide what human courts couldn't determine through evidence. Church authorities taught that water, blessed by God and used in baptism, would naturally reject anything unholy. If you floated, it meant the sacred element was pushing away your corrupted body, proving your guilt. If you sank and drowned, the water accepted you as innocent, a posthumous vindication that would comfort your grieving family but do little for your corpse. You feel the rough hemp rope binding your limbs as the executioner explains the procedure with professional detachment. Your thumbs will be tied to your opposite big toes, creating a position that makes swimming impossible while theoretically allowing an innocent person to sink naturally. The crowd watches with the same anticipation they'd show at a festival, their entertainment provided by your potential death. The historical development of trial by ordeal shows how desperation for certainty led to increasingly elaborate methods of forcing divine intervention. When witness testimony proved unreliable and physical evidence remained scarce, medieval courts turned to ordeals that supposedly compelled God to reveal truth through miraculous signs. Your trial represents the ultimate expression of this flawed logic, demanding that the Almighty personally intervene in local disputes. You discover that the preparation for your water trial involves rituals designed to ensure divine participation. Priests bless the water with prayers and holy oils, transforming an ordinary river or pond into a sacred testing ground. Your body might be blessed as well, supposedly ensuring that God will clearly demonstrate your innocence if you deserve salvation. These rituals provide spiritual theater that makes spectators feel they're witnessing genuine divine judgment rather than human cruelty. Historians still argue whether water trials were designed with deliberate bias toward finding guilt, or whether medieval authorities genuinely believed they were creating fair tests of innocence. The physical realities of the trial certainly favored drowning. Bound individuals thrown into water rarely survive regardless of their spiritual status. But the frequency with which accused witches somehow manage to float suggests either supernatural intervention or human manipulation of the results. You realize that your body type affects your chances of survival in ways that medieval minds attributed to spiritual rather than physical causes. People with higher body fat percentages naturally float more easily, while lean individuals tend to sink faster. Your diet, your physical condition, even your breathing patterns in the moments before submersion all influence whether you'll float or sink. But observers interpret these biological factors as evidence of your spiritual status. The crowd's expectations shape how they interpret what they observe. Spectators arrive already convinced of your guilt or innocence based on your reputation, your appearance, and the accusations against you. These preconceptions influence what they claim to see during the trial. Witnesses might swear you floated when you actually sank, or insist you sank when you clearly bobbed on the surface. Depending on what outcome they expect from someone with your characteristics, your survival instincts work against you during the ordeal. Natural human responses to drowning, struggling against bonds, attempting to keep your head above water, fighting for air, can be interpreted as evidence that the water is rejecting your evil body. But accepting death passively might be seen as proof that you're using supernatural powers to control the trial's outcome. There's literally no way to behave during a water trial that won't be interpreted as suspicious by those determined to find you guilty. The seasonal timing of water trials adds another layer of complexity to their interpretation. Cold water increases your chances of sinking quickly as your body loses buoyancy and your muscles cramp from temperature shock. Warm water might help you float more easily, but it also means you'll survive longer to be condemned as guilty. The weather conditions on your trial day become part of the divine message that observers claim to read in your performance. You can almost feel how your other suspicious characteristics influence the crowd's interpretation of your water trial. That red hair marking you as fiery and passionate makes spectators expect you to struggle violently against drowning. Your knowledge of herbs suggests you might have taken substances to affect your buoyancy. Your black cat, watching from the riverbank, appears to be using supernatural powers to influence your trial's outcome through telepathic communication. The legal procedures surrounding water trials reveal their fundamental unfairness. If you float and survive, you face immediate execution as a proven witch. If you sink and drown, your death serves as retroactive proof of innocence. But your family receives no compensation for the loss of an innocent person. The trial creates outcomes where authorities never have to admit error. Every result confirms the wisdom of their decision to proceed with the ordeal. Your final moments before entering the water become a stage for religious theatre. Priests offer last rites and opportunities for confession, encouraging you to admit your guilt and seek salvation before facing divine judgment. Your responses to these spiritual preparations are analyzed for evidence of your true nature. Too much religious fervor suggests you're trying to manipulate God, while insufficient piety proves your corruption. The physical sensation of hitting the water, feeling the cold liquid close over your head while your bound limbs prevent normal swimming motions, represents the ultimate helplessness of your situation. You understand viscerally that your fate depends not on justice, evidence, or divine intervention, but on unpredictable physical factors, crowd psychology, and the predetermined biases of those observing your ordeal. Do you remember all that evidence accumulating against you there? The birthmarks, the independence, the healing knowledge, the black cat, the red hair, the left-handedness, the brewing expertise. The water trial represents the moment when all those suspicions crystallize into a binary judgment that will either vindicate or condemn everything about your existence. As the cold water embraces your struggling body, you realize that you're not being tested by God, but by the fears, prejudices, and desperate need for certainty of a community that has transformed survival itself into evidence of guilt. You cradle your fourth healthy baby in your arms, gazing down at the perfect little face that represents everything wonderful about successful motherhood. Yet you understand with growing dread that your very success at bringing children safely into the world has now become one of your most damning pieces of evidence. In medieval Europe, where infant and maternal mortality claimed enormous numbers of lives, your ability to survive multiple pregnancies and deliver healthy babies appears suspiciously supernatural to those seeking explanations for your remarkable fortune. The stark statistics of medieval childbirth make your success appear miraculous in the most dangerous sense. Historical records suggest that maternal mortality rates ranged from 5 to 25% per pregnancy, meaning that women who bore multiple children faced cumulative risks that should have claimed their lives. Your survival through 4 successful births places you in a statistical minority so small that observers assume supernatural intervention must explain your continued existence. You feel the weight of your community's stares as they calculate the improbability of your reproductive success. When your neighbors lose babies to stillbirth, childhood diseases, or birthing complications while yours thrive and grow strong, their grief transforms into suspicion about the source of your protection. Your healthy children become evidence that you've made bargains with dark forces, trading your soul for your family's safety in ways that godly women wouldn't consider. The medieval understanding of pregnancy and childbirth was deeply intertwined with religious beliefs about women's spiritual status. The church taught that childbirth pain was divine punishment for Eve's original sin. making any woman who seemed to experience easier labors or faster recoveries suspect of circumventing God's intended suffering. Your ability to bounce back quickly from childbirth, to maintain your strength through multiple pregnancies, suggests you're avoiding the spiritual purification that other women must endure. You discover that even your knowledge of childbirth practices works against you. Your understanding of positioning zone, breathing techniques, herbal preparations for easing labor pain, and postpartum care accumulated through successful experiences appears as supernatural wisdom to women struggling with their own pregnancies. When you offer advice that helps other mothers, your success rate makes your knowledge appear magical rather than experiential. Historians still argue whether suspicion towards successful mothers represented genuine religious concern or reflected economic jealousy and social tensions around resource allocation in communities where child mortality meant fewer mouths to feed and more inheritance for surviving children. Your thriving family consumes resources that might otherwise be distributed among families with higher mortality rates. Your children's health and behavior become additional evidence of your supernatural status. When your babies cry less, sleep better, or develop more quickly than their peers, observers attribute these advantages to magical intervention rather than good genetics, adequate nutrition, or attentive parenting. Your children's success in avoiding childhood diseases that claim other youngsters suggests they're protected by forces beyond normal maternal care. The timing of your pregnancies creates opportunities for additional suspicion. If you conceive easily when trying for children, this suggests supernatural fertility enhancement. If you avoid pregnancy when you don't want more children, this implies knowledge of contraceptive magic that virtuous women shouldn't possess. Your ability to space your children at reasonable intervals appears to demonstrate control over biological processes that should be left to divine providence. You realize that your behavior during pregnancy itself provides fodder for supernatural theories. Your ability to continue working, to maintain good spirits, to avoid the extreme sickness and weakness that affect many pregnant women makes your condition appear unnaturally easy. When other women suffer through difficult pregnancies while you remain active and healthy, your resilience suggests demonic support rather than constitutional strength. The birthing process becomes a public performance where your pain responses are analyzed for authenticity and appropriate spiritual significance. If you scream too little during labor, you're suspected of using magical pain relief that interferes with God's intended punishment. If you scream too much, you might be accused of theatrical deception designed to hide your supernatural assistance. There's no correct way to experience childbirth that won't be interpreted suspiciously by those already convinced of your guilt. Your relationship with midwives and other birth attendants becomes complicated by your success rate. Midwives who assist at your successful births might gain suspicious reputations themselves, accused of learning magical techniques from you or participating in supernatural rituals. Alternatively, they might distance themselves from you, refusing to attend your births and thereby forcing you into even more suspicious circumstances of delivering alone or with only family assistance. The postpartum period provides additional opportunities for supernatural interpretation of normal biological processes. Your ability to produce sufficient breast milk, to recover your strength quickly, to avoid the infections and complications that claim many new mothers all suggest protection that goes beyond normal human resilience. When you nurse your babies successfully, while other mothers struggle with milk production or nursing difficulties, your success appears magical. You can almost feel how your reproductive success amplifies all your other suspicious characteristics. That birthmark that marked you from birth now appears to be Satan's seal on a woman he's chosen to protect through multiple dangerous pregnancies. Your herbal knowledge becomes interpreted as magical fertility enhancement and contraceptive wisdom. Your black cat seems to be a familiar spirit, ensuring your children's supernatural protection. The survival of all your children into healthy childhood creates an impossibly suspicious situation. In an era when families expected to lose multiple children to disease, accident, or malnutrition, your complete success appears to violate natural law. When plague, pox, or childhood fevers sweep through your community, claiming other people's babies while yours remain healthy, your family's protection suggests supernatural intervention that comes at a terrible spiritual cost. Your maternal instincts and protective behaviors toward your children get reinterpreted through supernatural lenses. Your ability to sense when your children are in danger, to know intuitively when they are becoming ill, to predict their needs and respond appropriately all appear to demonstrate psychic connections that exceed normal maternal bonds. Your fierce protectiveness toward your offspring suggests you're defending supernatural investments rather than expressing natural maternal love. The economic implications of your successful childbearing create additional resentment in communities struggling with resource scarcity. Your healthy, thriving children will grow up to compete for limited opportunities, inherit family resources, and potentially outcompete the children of less successful mothers. Your reproductive success threatens the prospects of other families in ways that generate genuine hostility disguised as spiritual concern. As you hold your healthy baby close, feeling the strong heartbeat and steady breathing that prove this child's vitality, you understand that even the most fundamental biological success, creating and sustaining life, has been transformed into evidence of supernatural corruption. In a world where fear overwhelms joy, you carefully trace the letters across the parchment, your finger following words that flow like poetry across the page, completely absorbed in the magical act of reading that has transported countless souls through stories and knowledge across centuries. But in medieval Europe, your literacy, this ability to decode mysterious symbols and transform them into meaning, has just marked you as dangerously educated in an age when learning itself could be considered a form of witchcraft, especially for someone of your gender and social status. The medieval world maintained strict hierarchies around who should possess the power of literacy. Reading and writing were primarily the domain of male clergy, nobles and merchants, with women's education carefully controlled and limited to religious texts when permitted at all. Your ability to read suggests you've somehow gained access to knowledge that wasn't intended for someone like you, raising immediate questions about how you acquired these forbidden skills and what dangerous texts you might have encountered. You feel the weight of suspicious stares when neighbors notice you examining written documents or see books among your possessions. In a largely illiterate society, your literacy makes you as unusual and potentially threatening as someone with supernatural powers. The ability to access knowledge through reading appears almost magical to those who can't decode written symbols, making your intellectual capabilities seem as mysterious and dangerous as spellcasting. The Church's complicated relationship with literacy creates additional problems for educated women like you. While Christianity valued literacy for reading scripture, religious authorities worried about unsupervised reading that might lead to heretical interpretations or exposure to forbidden knowledge. Your ability to read means you could potentially access texts that challenge orthodox teaching or provide information about practices the Church wanted to suppress. You discover that the very books in your possession become evidence of supernatural interests. If you own religious texts, critics assume you're studying them to pervert their meaning or learn counterspells against holy power. If you possess secular literature, stories, poetry, or practical manuals, these suggest worldly concerns that distract from proper spiritual focus. Medical or herbal texts are particularly damning, as they imply you're studying magical formulae disguised as healing knowledge. Historians still argue whether persecution of literate women represented genuine concern about religious orthodoxy, or reflected broader social anxieties about educated females challenging traditional power structures. The timing of increased suspicion toward the learned women coincides with periods of social upheaval when established authorities felt most threatened by alternative sources of knowledge and influence. Your handwriting itself becomes a form of evidence when you create written documents. Medieval scripts required extensive training to master properly, making your writing style a signature that reveals your educational background. If your penmanship appears too skilled, observers wonder where you received such sophisticated training. If it seems crude or unusual, they assume you're attempting to write in magical alphabets or encode supernatural messages. The content of anything you write faces intense scrutiny for hidden meanings and dangerous implications. Your personal letters might be analyzed for coded references to magical practices. Your household accounts could be interpreted as records of ingredient purchases for spellcasting. Even devotional writing gets examined for subtle heresies or evidence that you're mocking religious practices rather than genuinely participating in them. You realize that your literacy affects how others interpret your speech and conversation. Your vocabulary, enriched by reading, includes words and concepts that seem suspiciously sophisticated for someone of your social position. When you reference ideas from books or use language that demonstrates broad knowledge, listeners assume you're quoting from forbidden texts rather than displaying the natural results of extensive reading. Your ability to quote religious passages from memory becomes particularly problematic. If you recite scripture accurately, critics might claim you've memorized these texts for blasphemous purposes, planning to pervert their meaning in magical rituals. If you make small errors in quotation, this proves you're deliberately corrupting holy words to serve evil purposes. Your biblical knowledge becomes evidence against you regardless of how you demonstrate it. The teaching aspects of your literacy create additional dangers. When other women ask you to read letters aloud or help them understand written documents, your willingness to share knowledge appears to be spreading dangerous learning beyond its proper boundaries. Your informal education of others suggests you're building a network of accomplices or disciples who will help you in supernatural activities. You can almost taste the irony that your literacy might include the ability to read the very accusations being written against you, understanding the legal documents that condemn you, being able to follow the theological arguments that justify your persecution, reading the testimonies that seal your fate. Your education makes you uniquely qualified to understand the intellectual framework being used to destroy you. Your reading habits themselves become suspect when neighbors observe your behavior. If you read during daylight hours, you're neglecting proper domestic duties to pursue dangerous knowledge. If you read by candlelight after dark, you're engaging in secretive activities that honest people wouldn't need to hide. Your timing and location for reading always suggests something sinister to those seeking evidence of your guilt. The books you don't own become as suspicious as those you do possess. If you lack certain expected religious texts, this proves your impiety. If you're missing practical manuals that most households require, observers assume you don't need written instructions because you possess supernatural knowledge that makes books unnecessary. Your library always provides evidence against you, whether through its contents or its omissions. Your literacy enables you to stay informed about current events, legal developments, and intellectual trends in ways that can appear prophetic to less educated neighbors. When you predict political changes because you've read about developing situations, or anticipate legal modifications because you understand written announcements, your foresight seems supernatural rather than simply well-informed. The social isolation that often accompanies extensive reading creates additional suspicion about your activities. Time spent alone with books means time away from community supervision, providing opportunities for secret practices that no one can witness or verify. Your preference for intellectual pursuits over social gatherings suggests you're pursuing interests that can't bear public scrutiny. Do you remember how your accumulating evidence has been building? The birthmark, the independence, the herbal knowledge, the black cat, the red hair, the left-handedness, the brewing skills, the suspicious survival of water trials, the successful childbearing. Now add literacy to this collection, and you've created what medieval authorities would consider an almost perfect profile of a dangerous, educated witch whose knowledge makes her a threat to established order. As you close your book and carefully hide it away from prying eyes, you understand that even the most noble human achievement, the ability to preserve and share knowledge through written language, has been transformed into another weapon aimed at your destruction. You step outside your cottage and feel the subtle shift in air pressure. Notice how the birds have grown quiet. Observe the particular quality of light that tells you a storm approaches within the next few hours. Your ability to read nature's signs and predict weather changes, knowledge that helps your community prepare for rain, wind, or dangerous conditions, has become twisted into evidence that you don't simply forecast the weather, but actually control it through supernatural means. The medieval mind struggled to distinguish between prediction and causation when it came to weather phenomena. Your accurate forecasts of approaching storms, your warnings about dangerous winds, and your ability to advise neighbors when to bring in laundry or secure livestock appear to demonstrate power over natural forces rather than careful observation of atmospheric signs. When your predictions prove correct time after time, observers assume you're not reading nature but commanding it. You feel the weight of responsibility that comes with weather knowledge in agricultural communities where storms can destroy crops, floods can ruin harvests, and unexpected weather can mean the difference between survival and starvation. Your neighbors depend on your forecast to make crucial decisions about farming, travel, and daily activities. But this very dependence makes them suspicious about the source of your meteorological abilities. The ancient traditions of weather prediction that you've inherited from generations of observant ancestors become reinterpreted as magical practices in Christian medieval Europe. Your grandmother's teachings about cloud formations, wind patterns, and animal behaviors that signal weather changes are now viewed as supernatural knowledge passed down through family lines of witches, rather than accumulated wisdom from centuries of careful observation. You discover that your weather predictions create impossible social dynamics when you warn people about approaching bad weather and they heed your advice, avoiding disaster. Your accuracy proves your supernatural abilities. When people ignore your warnings and suffer the consequences you predicted, this demonstrates your power to cause harm to those who don't respect your authority. Either way, your meteorological knowledge works against you. Historians still argue whether weather prediction was genuinely feared as witchcraft or whether accusations served more practical purposes, such as providing scapegoats for agricultural disasters or eliminating people who possessed knowledge that made them too influential in communities dependent on farming and weather patterns. Your understanding of seasonal patterns and long-term weather trends appears prophetic to those who don't recognize the natural cycles you've learned to interpret. When you predict harsh winters based on early signs, wet springs from late fall indicators, or drought conditions from subtle atmospheric changes, your foresight seems to exceed normal human capabilities. Your ability to advise on planting times and harvest schedules based on weather patterns suggests supernatural communication with forces that control agricultural success. The tools and methods you use for weather observation become evidence of magical practices. Your practice of watching cloud formations might be interpreted as divination through sky reading. Your attention to wind direction changes appears to be communication with air spirits. Even your habit of noting how domestic animals behave before weather changes suggests you're consulting familiar spirits who report atmospheric conditions from the supernatural realm. You realize that your weather knowledge intersects dangerously with folk beliefs about witches' abilities to control storms, summon winds, and influence rainfall. When unexpected severe weather strikes after you've had conflicts with neighbors, they assume you've called down meteorological revenge rather than recognizing that weather patterns don't respond to human emotions or social disputes. Your accuracy in predicting specific weather phenomena creates particular suspicion. When you forecast not just that rain will come, but that it will arrive at particular times with specific intensity, your precision appears to exceed natural prediction abilities. Your detailed forecasts about storm duration, wind strength, or temperature changes suggest you're working from supernatural information sources rather than observational experience. The timing of your weather predictions aligns suspiciously with accusations about when witches practice their craft. Your most accurate forecasts often come from observations made during dawn and dusk hours when atmospheric conditions are most revealing. Your nighttime attention to weather signs, necessary because many changes occur during darkness, matches exactly with supposed times of supernatural activity. You can almost feel how your meteorological knowledge amplifies interpretations of your other suspicious characteristics. That red hair appears more connected to fire and storms when you accurately predict lightning. Your herbal knowledge seems more magical when you know which weather conditions will affect plant growth. Your black cat becomes a weather-controlling familiar when she exhibits behaviors that you recognize as responses to barometric pressure changes. Your ability to sense weather changes through physical symptoms, the way your joints ache before rain, how your skin feels different when humidity rises, the headaches that precede pressure drops, appear supernatural to those who don't experience such sensitivity. Your body's responses to atmospheric conditions suggest you're physically connected to weather systems in ways that exceed normal human experience. The protective advice you offer based on weather knowledge creates additional problems. When you warn people to avoid travel during dangerous conditions, your caution might be seen as an attempt to isolate potential victims for supernatural attack. When you suggest protective measures against coming storms, your preparations appear to be magical rituals designed to shield yourself while allowing others to suffer weather-related harm. Your weather predictions affect community planning in ways that give you influence over group decisions about farming, travel, and resource allocation. This practical power makes you valuable, but also threatening to established authorities who prefer that important community decisions flow through official channels rather than depending on your meteorological insights. The economic implications of accurate weather forecasting create additional tensions. Your ability to help some people protect their crops or livestock while others suffer weather-related losses appears to demonstrate favoritism that could only be explained by supernatural intervention. When those who follow your advice prosper while those who ignore it suffer losses, your weather knowledge becomes a form of economic control that threatens community stability. Your understanding of how weather affects human health and behavior, knowing that certain conditions trigger illnesses, influence moods, or affect physical comfort, makes your medical knowledge appear more supernatural. Your ability to predict when people will feel unwell based on approaching weather systems suggests you're not just forecasting atmospheric conditions, but planning to cause illness through weather magic. The seasonal cycles that govern your weather predictions align with traditional pagan celebrations that the church was trying to suppress. Your knowledge of when conditions favor certain agricultural activities connects you to pre-Christian farming rituals, while your understanding of weather patterns links you to ancient nature worship that medieval Christianity viewed as demonic. As you watch storm clouds gathering exactly as you predicted they would, you understand that even humanity's most practical need, knowing what weather to expect, has been transformed into evidence of supernatural power in a world where knowledge itself has become dangerous. You feel the familiar tingling sensation beginning in your left hand, the warning sign that always precedes one of your seizures, and you understand with crystalline terror that in medieval Europe, your epilepsy, this neurological condition that you can't control or prevent, has just transformed you from a person suffering from illness into a vessel for demonic possession. Your body's electrical misfirings, which modern medicine explains through brain chemistry and neural pathways, become interpreted as evidence that evil spirits are literally fighting for control of your soul. The medieval understanding of seizures and neurological disorders relied heavily on supernatural explanations for phenomena that seem to transcend normal human experience. When your body convulses beyond your conscious control, when your eyes roll back and your speech becomes incomprehensible, when you lose awareness of your surroundings and emerge from seizures confused and exhausted, observers interpret these symptoms as clear evidence that otherworldly forces are temporarily inhabiting your physical form. You feel the social isolation that accompanies your condition as neighbors increasingly avoid contact with someone they believe might be contagious with spiritual corruption. Your seizures make you unpredictable and frightening to people who don't understand what's happening inside your brain, creating a circle of fear around you that grows wider with each episode that witnesses observe. The timing of your seizures becomes particularly problematic when they occur during religious services, community gatherings, or other public events where your condition can be interpreted as demonic protest against holy activities. The Church's teachings about possession and spiritual warfare provide seemingly authoritative explanations for your neurological symptoms. Religious authorities describe demonic possession in terms that align perfectly with seizure behaviors, loss of conscious control, speaking in unknown languages, superhuman strength during episodes, and apparent communication with invisible entities. Your condition fits so precisely into these theological categories that arguing for natural causes appears to be denying obvious spiritual reality. You discover that any unusual behaviors or symptoms you experience between seizures become reinterpreted as evidence of ongoing supernatural influence. The auras that warn you of approaching episodes, strange smells, visual disturbances, or emotional changes appear to be psychic communications from demonic sources. Your post-seizure confusion, memory gaps, and physical exhaustion suggest that evil forces have been using your body for supernatural activities that you can't remember. Historians still argue whether medieval authorities genuinely believe neurological disorders represented demonic activity, or whether these interpretations provided convenient justifications for eliminating people whose conditions made them social burdens, or whose seizure-related behaviors threatened community stability. Your attempts to manage your condition through rest, diet, or herbal remedies become evidence of magical practices designed to communicate with possessing spirits. When you recognize warning signs and try to find safe places for seizures, your preparation appears to be arranging private meetings with demons. When you use traditional remedies that sometimes reduce seizure frequency, your medical knowledge seems to be supernatural negotiation with evil forces. The physical symptoms of your seizures align disturbingly well with contemporary descriptions of witchcraft activities. Your convulsions resemble the writhing movements attributed to demonic ecstasy. While your unconsciousness during episodes appears to be times when your soul travels to supernatural realms, the strength you sometimes display during seizures, thrashing that requires multiple people to restrain you, suggests possession by entities with superhuman power. Your speech during and after seizures provides particularly damning evidence to those seeking proof of supernatural activity. The incomprehensible sounds you make during episodes are interpreted as demonic languages or magical incantations. If you cry out recognizable words, these might be seen as blasphemous statements or supernatural predictions. Your post-seizure confusion, when you struggle to remember where you are or what's happening, appears to be disorientation from returning to the physical world after demonic journeys. Do you realize that your seizure triggers, stress, lack of sleep, certain foods, or environmental factors become interpreted as evidence that demons respond to specific summoning conditions? When seizures occur during times of community tension or personal conflict, observers assume evil spirits are reacting to social discord, or that you're calling upon supernatural assistance during difficult situations. Your condition affects how others interpret your personality and behavior during normal, seizure-free periods. Your need for adequate rest makes you appear lazy or withdrawn from proper social participation. Your careful attention to diet and lifestyle factors that might trigger episodes appears to be maintenance of magical practices rather than medical self-care. Your knowledge about your own condition seems suspiciously sophisticated for someone who should be merely suffering from divine punishment or demonic affliction. The hereditary aspects of some neurological conditions create additional problems for your family members. If relatives also experience seizures or similar symptoms, this suggests your bloodline carries supernatural corruption that passes through generations. Your children might face suspicion even if they never develop neurological symptoms, simply because they share your potentially cursed heritage. You can almost feel how your seizure disorder amplifies interpretations of all your other suspicious characteristics. That birthmark becomes Satan's seal on a body he regularly inhabits, while your herbal knowledge appears to be medical information provided by demonic spirits. Your black cat seems to be a familiar that helps summon possessing entities, while your weather prediction abilities suggest supernatural communication during seizure-induced travels to other realms. The unpredictable timing of your seizures creates impossible social situations. When episodes occur during religious activities, they appear to be demonic protests against holy practices. When they happen during community celebrations, they seem to be supernatural disruptions of godly joy. When seizures strike during times of crisis or decision-making, observers interpret them as evil interventions designed to prevent good outcomes or community unity. Your medical needs during and after seizures require care and understanding that become increasingly difficult to obtain as supernatural interpretations of your condition spread. People fear touching you during episodes, worried about spiritual contamination from contact with a possessed body. Your recovery needs, quiet rest, protection from injury, patient assistance as awareness returns, become viewed as special treatment for someone in league with evil forces. The cyclical nature of your neurological condition creates patterns that observers interpret as supernatural schedules. If your seizures follow identifiable triggers or seasonal patterns, these appear to be appointments for demonic meetings rather than medical phenomena. Your periods of wellness between episodes suggest times when possessing spirits are away on other supernatural business, rather than simply reflecting the natural progression of your neurological disorder, as you feel another seizure approaching and desperately seek a safe place where your convulsions won't be witnessed and interpreted as evidence of witchcraft. You understand that even involuntary medical conditions have been weaponized against you in an age where illness itself could be considered proof of spiritual corruption. You find yourself muttering quietly as you work in your garden, talking through the day's tasks and thinking aloud about which herbs need watering, completely unaware that your perfectly normal habit of speaking to yourself has become one of the most damning pieces of evidence against you in medieval Europe. Your solitary conversations, those internal dialogues that every human being conducts throughout their daily activities, are now interpreted as clear proof that you're communicating with invisible demonic companions who guide your supernatural activities. The medieval worldview struggled to understand why anyone would speak when no human listeners were present, defaulting to supernatural explanations for behavior that modern psychology recognizes as completely normal. Your habit of thinking out loud while working, planning your activities verbally, or simply talking to fill the silence of your solitary existence appears to observers as evidence that you're receiving instructions from evil spirits or reporting on your activities to unseen demonic supervisors. You feel the weight of constant observation as neighbors strain to overhear your private conversations, analyzing every word you speak alone for evidence of supernatural communication. Your innocent comments about daily tasks get reinterpreted as magical incantations, while your expressions of frustration or worry become pleas for demonic assistance. Even your habit of humming or singing when you work transforms into evidence that you're chanting supernatural formulas. The content of your solitary speech becomes forensically examined for hidden meanings and dangerous implications. When you talk yourself through complex tasks, reminding yourself of steps in brewing, organizing your thoughts about herb preparation, or planning your day's activities, observers assume you're receiving detailed instructions from invisible advisors. Your verbal problem solving appears to be supernatural consultation rather than normal human cognitive processing. You discover that different types of solitary speech create varying levels of suspicion among those watching for evidence of your supernatural activities. If you speak in your normal voice while alone, this suggests comfortable familiarity with demonic companions. If you whisper, you're obviously trying to hide supernatural conversations from human ears. If you speak more loudly, you might be communicating with spirits located at great distances or in other realms. Historians still argue whether accusations based on solitary speech represented genuine belief in demonic communication, or provided convenient evidence for authorities seeking to eliminate socially isolated individuals whose private behaviors couldn't be monitored and controlled through normal community supervision. Your responses to your own questions during internal dialogues become interpreted as evidence of two-way conversations with supernatural entities. When you ask yourself, "Where did I put that recipe?" and then answer, "Oh, it's in the wooden box," observers assume they're witnessing dialogue between you and helpful demons who assist with daily activities. Your natural tendency to argue with yourself about decisions appears to be negotiation with evil spirits about supernatural services. The emotional content of your self-directed speech provides additional ammunition for those seeking proof of your guilt. When you express frustration with difficult tasks, observers interpret this as complaints to demonic assistance about inadequate supernatural help. When you encourage yourself through challenging work, this appears to be receiving motivational support from evil companions. Your expressions of satisfaction at completed tasks seem like gratitude directed toward invisible supernatural helpers. You realize that your habit of talking to animals, addressing your cat, speaking to farm animals, or commenting to birds in your garden gets lumped together with evidence of communication with familiar spirits. Your natural tendency to anthropomorphize creatures around you, speaking to them as if they understand, appears to be genuine conversation with demonic entities inhabiting animal forms. Your pet's responses to your voice become interpreted as supernatural communication rather than normal animal behavior. Your solitary prayers and religious expressions become particularly problematic when overheard by suspicious neighbors. If you pray aloud while alone, Observers might assume you're mocking religious practices or perverting holy words for magical purposes. Your personal devotions, meant to demonstrate piety, instead provide evidence that you're comfortable speaking to invisible entities, a skill that could easily be transferred from communication with God to conversation with demons. The timing of your solitary speech creates additional suspicion about your supernatural activities. When you talk to yourself while working at dawn or dusk, times when light conditions make observation difficult, this aligns perfectly with supposed periods of maximum supernatural activity. Your nighttime conversations, whether prayer, planning, or simple loneliness, appear to be scheduled meetings with demonic advisors who prefer darkness for their communications. You can almost taste the paranoia building around your most basic human need for verbal expression. Your solitary lifestyle, already suspicious, becomes even more threatening when combined with evidence that you maintain active conversational relationships with invisible companions. The isolation that makes self-directed speech necessary also makes it appear supernatural to those who don't understand the psychological benefits of verbal processing. Your habit of reading aloud while alone compounds suspicions about your supernatural communications. When you sound out written words to better understand complex texts, observers assume you're reciting magical formulas or receiving supernatural education from demonic tutors. Your vocal practice of religious passages appears to be learning blasphemous versions of holy words for use in evil rituals. The practical benefits of talking to yourself, organizing thoughts, working through problems, maintaining mental stimulation during solitary work become twisted into evidence of supernatural assistance that gives you unfair advantages over neighbors who must rely solely on human intelligence. Your ability to think through complex issues verbally suggests you're consulting with entities whose knowledge exceeds normal human understanding. Your responses to stress or surprise, when you might exclaim or comment reflexively to yourself, provide additional evidence of supernatural communication. Your natural expressions of shock, frustration, or delight appear to be reports directed toward invisible observers who monitor your emotional states. Even your unconscious habit of saying "bless me" or "Lord help me" during difficult moments gets interpreted as appeals to demonic rather than divine assistance. The social isolation that makes solitary speech necessary also means fewer witnesses who might provide alternative explanations for your behavior. Without friends or family members who can testify that talking to yourself is simply your normal habit, observers are free to interpret your conversations as evidence of supernatural relationships that confirm all their other suspicions about your character. Do you remember how your evidence has been accumulating the birthmarks, independence, herbal knowledge, black cat, red hair, left-handedness, brewing skills, miraculous survival, successful motherhood, dangerous literacy, weather prediction, seizure disorder? Now add your habit of speaking to yourself, and you've created what medieval prosecutors would consider an almost perfect profile of someone in regular communication with evil spirits who guide every aspect of your supernatural existence. As you catch yourself murmuring plans for tomorrow's tasks and quickly fall silent, you understand that even the most basic human tendency toward verbal thought has been transformed into evidence of demonic conspiracy. You can't help but sway slightly to the rhythm in your head as you work, your feet tapping out an ancient melody that your grandmother used to sing while she kneaded bread, completely unaware that this innocent expression of joy and cultural tradition has become one of the most scandalous pieces of evidence against you in medieval Europe. Your natural tendency to dance and sing, those universal human expressions of happiness, celebration, and connection to music, have been twisted into proof that you participate in wild Sabbath gatherings where witches dance with demons under the cover of darkness. The medieval church had developed a deeply suspicious relationship with music and dance, viewing these activities as potentially dangerous expressions of uncontrolled passion that could lead souls away from proper spiritual focus. Your rhythmic movements while working, your habit of humming traditional songs, and your occasional spontaneous dancing appear to religious authorities as evidence of participation in pagan rituals that Christianity had been trying to suppress for centuries. You feel the weight of disapproving stares when neighbors notice your musical expressions during daily activities, your tendency to sing while you brew, to dance while you tend your garden, or to hum traditional melodies while you work appears as evidence that you're practicing supernatural rituals disguised as innocent entertainment. The joy you express through movement and song suggests a spiritual corruption that makes you dangerously comfortable with activities that good Christians should approach with caution and moderation. The ancient traditions of folk music and dance that you've inherited represent cultural knowledge that predates Christianity in your region, making your musical abilities appear connected to pre-Christian practices that the church considers demonic. Your grandmother's songs, passed down through generations of women, carry melodies and lyrics that originated in goddess worship, seasonal celebrations, and fertility rituals that medieval Christianity had branded as witchcraft. You discover that different types of musical expression create varying levels of suspicion among observers seeking evidence of supernatural activity. If you sing religious hymns, critics assume you're perverting holy music for magical purposes. If you perform secular songs, this proves your worldly focus and lack of proper spiritual priorities. If you create original melodies or improvise variations on traditional tunes, this suggests supernatural inspiration from demonic muses. Historians still argue whether persecution of musical women represented genuine religious concern about pagan practices or served more practical purposes, such as eliminating cultural traditions that competed with church authority, or suppressing forms of expression that gave women too much social influence and community connection. Your knowledge of traditional dances becomes particularly problematic when these movements align with seasonal celebrations or agricultural cycles. Your ability to perform harvest dances, fertility rituals disguised as folk traditions, or seasonal ceremonies that mark solstices and equinoxes connects you to pre-Christian religious practices that medieval authorities considered devil worship. Your graceful execution of these ancient movements suggests years of practice in supernatural ceremonies. The physical nature of dance itself creates suspicion about your moral character and spiritual status. Medieval religious authorities taught that bodily pleasure and rhythmic movement could lead to sexual temptation and spiritual corruption. Your comfort with dancing, your natural grace in movement, and your obvious enjoyment of physical expression suggest a dangerous comfort with bodily pleasure that virtuous women should avoid. Your musical abilities appear supernatural to communities where formal musical training was rare and expensive. Your skill at remembering complex melodies, your ability to harmonize naturally, or your talent for creating beautiful sounds using simple instruments suggest education or abilities that exceed what someone of your social status should possess. Your musical competence implies supernatural enhancement of natural talents. You realize that the timing of your musical expressions creates additional evidence against you. When you sing or dance during evening hours, this aligns with supposed times of supernatural activity. Your musical practices during seasonal transitions, singing harvest songs, performing traditional dances at planting time, or celebrating with music during traditional festival periods connect you to pagan calendar cycles that the church was trying to eliminate. The social aspects of music and dance become twisted into evidence of supernatural networking. When you teach songs to other women, you appear to be spreading magical formulas disguised as entertainment. When you participate in group singing or communal dancing, observers assume you're organizing or participating in witches' covens that use music to summon demonic participants to their gatherings. Your emotional responses to music provide additional ammunition for those seeking proof of your spiritual corruption. When certain melodies move you to tears, this suggests supernatural communication through musical channels. When rhythmic music inspires you to spontaneous movement, your responses appear to be involuntary possession by spirits who control your body through sound. Your obvious pleasure in musical expression suggests dangerous comfort with activities that can lead souls astray. You can almost feel how your musical abilities amplify interpretations of your other suspicious characteristics. Your herbal knowledge seems more magical when you sing while mixing remedies, suggesting incantations that activate supernatural properties. Your weather prediction abilities appear more supernatural when you can sense atmospheric changes through the way sound carries differently before storms. Your solitary lifestyle becomes more threatening when filled with musical expressions that suggest ongoing supernatural entertainment. Your instruments, if you own any simple ones, become evidence of magical apparatus. A basic drum used for keeping rhythm appears to be equipment for summoning spirits, while a simple flute or whistle suggests communication devices for signaling supernatural companions. Even improvised musical tools, rattles made from dried gourds, bells sewn onto clothing, or rhythm sticks carved from wood, appear to be ceremonial objects designed for ritual use. The traditional association between music and healing and folk culture creates additional problems for your reputation. When your songs seem to comfort sick children, when your humming appears to ease pain, or when your musical presence helps people feel better, observers assume you're using supernatural methods disguised as entertainment. Your musical therapy appears to be magical healing rather than the natural psychological benefits of rhythm and melody. Your memory for songs and ability to improvise new verses suggests supernatural inspiration that allows you to create magical formulas spontaneously. Your skill at adapting traditional melodies for new situations appears to be evidence of demonic creativity that enables you to compose spells and incantations as circumstances require. Your musical flexibility becomes proof of supernatural artistic abilities. The gender implications of your musical expression compound suspicions about your character. Medieval authorities particularly worried about women's music because female voices and movements were considered more sexually tempting and spiritually dangerous than male artistic expression. Your feminine musical abilities carry additional moral weight that makes your dancing and singing appear more threatening to community spiritual safety. As you catch yourself humming and quickly fall silent, aware of the suspicious glances your musical joy attracts, you understand that even humanity's most universal forms of artistic expression have been transformed into evidence of supernatural corruption in a world where joy itself has become dangerous. You kneel beside the laboring woman, your experienced hands guiding her through the ancient ritual of childbirth, your voice offering encouragement as you help bring new life into the world, completely unaware that your role as midwife, this sacred calling that makes you one of the most valuable members of your community, has simultaneously made you one of the most dangerous suspects in medieval Europe's witch-hunting fever. Your ability to ease the pain of labor, to save mothers and babies from death, and to facilitate the mysterious process of birth has been twisted into evidence that you possess supernatural powers over life and death itself. The profession of midwifery placed you at the intersection of life and death, pleasure and pain, the sacred and the mysterious in ways that medieval minds struggled to categorize as purely natural. Your presence at nearly every birth in your community means you witness the most vulnerable moments in human existence, times when souls are believed to be most susceptible to supernatural influence. Your success at guiding mothers and babies safely through childbirth appears to exceed what normal human skill should accomplish. You feel the weight of impossible expectations that come with your calling. When births go well under your care, observers assume you're using magical assistance to ensure successful outcomes when, despite your best efforts, mothers or babies die. Critics claim you've deliberately caused these deaths through witchcraft or failed to save them because you've withdrawn your supernatural protection. Your mortality rates become evidence of your supernatural powers regardless of whether they're better or worse than average. The intimate knowledge of women's bodies, of reproductive processes that your profession requires appears suspiciously comprehensive to those seeking evidence of supernatural education. Your understanding of anatomy, your ability to predict complications, and your knowledge of techniques for managing difficult births suggests training that exceeds what normal human instruction could provide. Your medical expertise appears to be supernatural wisdom gained through demonic consultation. You discover that the tools and techniques of your trade become reinterpreted as magical apparatus and supernatural rituals. Your collection of birthing chairs, delivery aids, and specialized instruments looks like equipment for magical ceremonies rather than medical tools. Your knowledge of positioning techniques, breathing methods, and pain management strategies appears to be supernatural manipulation of natural processes rather than accumulated professional experience. Historians still argue whether persecution of midwives represented genuine concern about supernatural practices or reflected broader social tensions around women's traditional medical authority during periods when male-dominated medical institutions were seeking to establish professional control over healthcare delivery. Your use of herbal remedies during childbirth creates additional evidence of supernatural practices. When you administer pain-relieving herbs, strengthen contractions with natural medicines, or prevent infections using traditional remedies, your pharmaceutical knowledge appears to be magical potion-making rather than legitimate medical treatment. Your success with herbal interventions suggests supernatural enhancement of natural plant properties. The timing of births under your care becomes analyzed for evidence of supernatural influence. When babies are born during auspicious times, avoiding unlucky days, arriving during favorable weather, or timing their arrival to coincide with positive community events, observers assume you've used magical manipulation to control birth timing, rather than recognizing the natural variability of human gestation. Your relationship with the laboring mothers creates additional suspicion about the nature of your assistance. Your ability to calm frightened women, to provide emotional support during painful labor, and to guide mothers through the psychological challenges of childbirth appears to exceed normal human empathy. Your success at helping women cope with pain and fear suggests supernatural influence over human emotions and mental states. You realize that your knowledge of pregnancy complications and your ability to predict difficult births appear prophetic to those who don't understand the medical signs you've learned to recognize. When you identify problems early and take preventive measures, your foresight seems supernatural. When you recommend interventions that save lives, your medical judgment appears to be supernatural guidance rather than professional expertise developed through years of experience. The survival rates of mothers and babies under your care become statistically analyzed for evidence of supernatural intervention in an era when childbirth mortality was devastatingly high. Your success at saving lives creates the impossible situation we've seen before. Competence becomes evidence of supernatural assistance. Your professional skill appears to violate natural law in communities where death during childbirth was tragically common. Your presence at the moment of birth places you at times when souls are believed to enter the physical world, making you a witness to supernatural processes that most people never observe. Your familiarity with the mysteries of birth, your comfort with the spiritual aspects of bringing life into the world, and your role in the transition between life and death suggests supernatural knowledge about the boundaries between physical and spiritual realms. You can almost feel how your midwifery practice amplifies all your other suspicious characteristics. Your herbal knowledge becomes magical potion-making when used during childbirth, while your ability to predict weather becomes supernatural timing of births to coincide with favorable conditions. Your literacy allows you to keep records that appear to be magical documentation of supernatural births, while your solitary conversations seem to be consultations with demonic advisors about difficult cases. The economic implications of your profession create additional tensions within your community. As one of the few people with essential medical skills, you command respect and payment that some community members resent. Your professional success creates wealth and influence that appear disproportionate to what a woman should possess, suggesting supernatural assistance in building your practice and maintaining your reputation. Your training of other women in birthing assistance appears to be teaching magical practices rather than sharing medical knowledge. When you pass along techniques for managing difficult births, remedies for common complications, or methods for supporting laboring mothers, observers assume you're establishing a network of supernatural practitioners rather than training legitimate medical assistants. The psychological aspects of your work, your ability to remain calm during emergencies, to make life and death decisions under pressure, and to provide leadership during medical crises, suggest supernatural enhancement of natural human capabilities. Your professional composure during traumatic situations appears to exceed what normal human psychology should handle without supernatural support. Your intimate involvement with the reproductive lives of community women gives you knowledge about pregnancies, fertility issues, and family planning that appears suspiciously comprehensive, your awareness of which women are pregnant before they announce it publicly. Your understanding of fertility patterns and your knowledge about preventing or encouraging conception suggests supernatural insight into reproductive mysteries that virtuous women shouldn't possess. The sacred nature of birth itself, with its connections to creation, divinity, and the mysteries of life, makes your professional involvement with these processes appear to be participation in supernatural events that exceed normal human authority. Your role in facilitating the arrival of new souls suggests communication with divine or demonic forces that control human reproduction. As you wash the blood from your hands after another successful delivery, you understand that even the most essential and life-saving work has been transformed into evidence of supernatural corruption when fear overwhelms gratitude and suspicion triumphs over recognition. You wake from another vivid dream where you soared above your village on wings of moonlight, conversing with strange figures who spoke in languages you somehow understood, exploring landscapes that existed nowhere in the waking world but felt more real than your own cottage when you experienced them in medieval Europe. Your rich dream life and occasional prophetic visions, those neurological phenomena that modern science explains through REM, sleep patterns, and subconscious processing, have become the most damning evidence yet that your soul regularly travels to supernatural realms for meetings with demonic hosts. The medieval understanding of dreams relied heavily on spiritual interpretations that divided nocturnal visions into categories: divine revelations sent by God, natural dreams produced by bodily humors, or demonic communications initiated by evil spirits. Your particularly vivid and memorable dreams, especially those containing unusual imagery or prophetic elements, automatically fall into the most dangerous category: evidence of regular supernatural contact that proves your participation in witchcraft activities. You feel the growing isolation as you learn to hide your dream experiences from neighbors who might interpret any unusual nocturnal vision as proof of your guilt. Your natural tendency to share interesting dreams, to seek interpretation of confusing imagery, or to mention prophetic dreams that later prove accurate becomes impossible in a community where dream content serves as evidence in supernatural prosecutions. The Church's teachings about soul travel during sleep provide theological framework for interpreting your dream experiences as literal supernatural journeys. Religious authorities taught that while the body rests, the soul could be called away for meetings with spiritual entities, either divine encounters for the blessed or demonic consultations for the corrupted. Your vivid dreams suggest your soul has been making regular trips to participate in witches' sabbaths and supernatural gatherings. You discover that different types of dream content create varying levels of suspicion among those analyzing your nocturnal experiences. Dreams about flying indicate your participation in supernatural transportation to witches' meetings. Dreams involving unknown people suggest contact with demonic entities or other supernatural practitioners. Dreams set in unfamiliar locations imply your soul has visited otherworldly realms where normal humans cannot travel. Historians still argue whether medieval authorities genuinely believed in literal dream-based soul travel, or whether dream content provided convenient evidence for prosecuting individuals whose other behaviors had already marked them as suspicious within their communities. Their occasional prophetic dreams, those times when dream imagery later manifests in waking life, create the most compelling evidence of supernatural communication. When you dream of storms that later strike, of illnesses that subsequently afflict community members, or of events that unfold exactly as your dreams predicted, observers assume you're receiving advanced information from supernatural sources rather than recognizing the natural psychological processes that sometimes allow subconscious minds to anticipate future developments. The emotional intensity of your dreams becomes analyzed for evidence of supernatural influence. Dreams that leave you feeling frightened upon waking suggest you've witnessed or participated in evil activities during soul travel. Dreams that produce feelings of joy or ecstasy imply you've enjoyed pleasurable experiences with demonic companions. Dreams that create lasting emotional impact appear to be genuine experiences rather than mere nocturnal imagination. You realize that your ability to remember dreams in unusual detail appears supernatural to communities where most people either don't recall their dreams or remember only fragments. Your capacity to narrate complex dream sequences, to recall specific conversations from nocturnal visions, Or to describe dream imagery with vivid precision suggests your dream experiences are more than normal sleep phenomena. Your dream content often includes elements that align suspiciously with folkloric descriptions of witchcraft activities. Dreams of feasting might represent participation in supernatural banquets, while dreams of dancing could indicate attendance at demonic celebrations. Dreams involving animals, especially your black cat, suggest communication with familiar spirits, while dreams of healing or harming others imply practicing supernatural medicine during soul travel. The timing of your most vivid dreams creates additional evidence against you. Dreams that occur during traditionally supernatural hours, around midnight, during the new moon, or on dates associated with seasonal celebrations, appear to be scheduled supernatural meetings rather than random neurological events. Your dream patterns seem to follow a supernatural calendar that coordinates with other witchcraft activities. You can almost feel how your dream experiences amplify interpretations of all your other suspicious characteristics. Your herbal knowledge appears to be information gathered during supernatural consultations, while your weather prediction abilities seem to be intelligence received from demonic sources during dream meetings. Your successful midwifery practice looks like supernatural assistance promised during nocturnal negotiations with evil entities. Your occasional sleep disturbances, talking in your sleep, restless movements during dreams, or waking at unusual hours, become interpreted as evidence of supernatural activity. When you speak during dreams, observers assume you're conducting conversations with invisible companions. When you move restlessly, this suggests your soul is struggling to return from supernatural journeys. When you wake suddenly, you appear to be interrupted while participating in demonic activities. The physical symptoms you sometimes experience after particularly intense dreams, fatigue, headaches, or emotional residue, suggest your soul has undergone genuine supernatural experiences that affected your physical body. Your post-dream exhaustion appears to be the natural result of nocturnal supernatural labor, while emotional effects prove the psychological impact of genuine otherworldly encounters. Your interest in dream interpretation, whether through traditional folk knowledge or personal curiosity about dream meaning, becomes evidence of supernatural education. Your ability to analyze dream symbolism suggests training in magical arts, while your knowledge of dream traditions connects you to practices that predate Christian authority in your region. The recurring themes in your dreams create patterns that observers interpret as evidence of ongoing supernatural relationships. If you frequently dream about specific people, this suggests regular contact with particular demonic entities. If your dreams consistently involve certain activities, these appear to be repeated supernatural practices rather than random neurological processing of daily experiences. Your ability to influence others through sharing dream content, when your prophetic dreams warn people of dangers or your symbolic dreams provide guidance for community decisions, suggests supernatural power over other people's lives through dream-based intelligence gathering. Your dream-derived knowledge appears to give you unfair advantages in predicting and influencing future events. The sexual content of some dreams, particularly common during certain life phases, becomes interpreted as evidence of supernatural seduction or demonic relationships. Dreams involving intimate encounters suggest participation in sexual activities with demonic entities, while dreams of pregnancy or birth might indicate supernatural reproduction with evil spirits. Your comfort with discussing dreams, your lack of fear about unusual dream content, and your obvious fascination with nocturnal visions suggest dangerous familiarity with supernatural realms that virtuous Christians should avoid. Your ease with dream experiences appears to prove regular practice in soul travel that has made supernatural activities feel natural and safe. As you carefully avoid mentioning your latest prophetic dream, which showed exactly where the village's lost sheep would be found, you understand that even humanity's most universal experience, dreaming, has been weaponized against you in a world where imagination itself has become evidence of guilt. You catch your reflection in the water bucket and notice features that have always been part of your natural appearance. Perhaps eyes of different colors, a prominent birthmark, an unusual scar, or teeth that grew in crooked patterns, completely unaware that these simple accidents of genetics and development have become a catalogue of supernatural evidence against you in medieval Europe. Your physical differences, whether present from birth or acquired through life's normal injuries and illnesses, are now interpreted as visible proof that dark forces have marked, touched, or claimed your body for evil purposes. The medieval mind operated on the principle that God created humans in perfect divine image, making any deviation from perceived normalcy automatically suspect of supernatural interference. Your heterochromia, one brown eye and one green, appears to observers as evidence that you can see simultaneously into the natural world and the supernatural realm. Your crooked teeth suggest you've been physically altered by demonic forces, while that scar from a childhood accident becomes reinterpreted as evidence of a supernatural attack or ritual marking. You feel the constant weight of trying to hide or minimize your physical differences, understanding that every unusual feature provides ammunition for those seeking proof of your supernatural nature. Your attempts to conceal a prominent birthmark under clothing, to avoid smiling widely to hide your irregular teeth, or to look away quickly to prevent people from noticing your different colored eyes all create additional suspicious behavior that suggests you're aware of your own supernatural markings. The medieval medical understanding of physical differences relied heavily on supernatural explanations for variations that modern science explains through genetics, developmental biology, and environmental factors. Your slightly webbed fingers appear to be evidence of supernatural parentage rather than a common genetic variation. Your unusual height, whether particularly tall or notably short, suggests intervention by otherworldly forces in your normal human development. You discover that different types of physical differences create varying levels of supernatural suspicion among observers, seeking evidence of your otherworldly connections. Congenital differences present from birth suggest prenatal supernatural influence or demonic interference with natural development. Acquired differences from accidents or illnesses imply subsequent supernatural attacks or voluntary participation in rituals that left permanent marks on your body. Historians still argue whether focus on physical differences represented genuine belief in supernatural marking or provided convenient visual evidence for persecuting individuals who already face suspicion due to social isolation, economic competition, or religious nonconformity within their communities. Your scars tell stories that get reinterpreted through supernatural lenses regardless of their actual origins. That mark from falling out of a tree as a child becomes evidence of a failed attempt to fly using supernatural powers. The scar from a kitchen accident suggests that you were injured while mixing magical potions. Even surgical scars from necessary medical procedures appear to be evidence of supernatural healing or ritual markings created during demonic ceremonies. The asymmetry of human faces and bodies, normally invisible to casual observation, becomes magnified under suspicious examination. Your slightly uneven eyebrows suggest supernatural interference with natural facial development. One shoulder that sits marginally higher than the other appears to be evidence of carrying supernatural burdens or participating in demonic labor. Even the natural variations in limb length that affect everyone become interpreted as proof of supernatural alteration. Your unusual physical abilities or limitations create additional evidence of supernatural influence. If you possess exceptional flexibility, this suggests unnatural physical properties granted by demonic forces. If you have limited mobility due to injury or illness, observers assume you're being punished for supernatural activities or that evil spirits inhabit your weakened body. Your physical capabilities always appear to exceed or fall short of normal human ranges in suspicious ways. You realize that your clothing choices and grooming habits, designed to manage or accommodate your physical differences, become interpreted as attempts to hide supernatural evidence or display supernatural symbols. Your preference for head coverings to hide unusual hair patterns appears to be concealing ritual markings. Your choice of loose clothing to accommodate physical differences suggests hiding supernatural alterations to your body shape. The way light affects your appearance at different times of day creates varying impressions that observers interpret as evidence of supernatural transformation abilities. Your different colored eyes might appear more pronounced in certain lighting conditions, suggesting you can alter your appearance through magical means. Shadows that fall differently across asymmetrical features make you appear to change shape or expression in ways that seem supernatural. Your family resemblance to relatives who share similar physical variations becomes evidence of hereditary supernatural corruption. When your unusual features appear in your children or match those of your parents, observers assume your entire bloodline carries supernatural markings passed down through generations of supernatural practitioners. Your genetic inheritance appears to be spiritual curse rather than normal biological variation. You can almost feel how your physical differences amplify interpretations of all your other suspicious characteristics. Your herbal knowledge seems more magical when possessed by someone whose unusual eyes suggest supernatural sight. Your weather prediction abilities appear more supernatural when demonstrated by someone whose physical differences suggest otherworldly connections. Your successful childbearing becomes more suspicious when achieved by someone whose body bears visible supernatural marks. The psychological impact of constant scrutiny of your physical appearance creates behaviors that generate additional suspicion. Your self-consciousness about your differences might be interpreted as shame about supernatural markings. Your attempts to deflect attention from your unusual features appear to be deliberate concealment of supernatural evidence. Your acceptance of your appearance suggests dangerous comfort with supernatural alterations. Your interaction with mirrors, reflective surfaces, or portraits becomes analyzed for evidence of supernatural properties. Medieval folklore suggested that supernatural beings might not cast proper reflections or might appear differently in mirrors than in person. Your natural tendency to avoid looking at yourself, common among people self-conscious about physical differences, appears to be evidence that you fear supernatural detection through reflected images. The medical treatments you might seek for physical differences become reinterpreted as supernatural remedies. Your use of herbs to treat skin conditions appears to be magical attempts to conceal supernatural markings. Your efforts to manage physical limitations through exercise or adaptation suggest you're using supernatural strength to overcome natural weaknesses. Your acceptance of permanent differences implies comfort with supernatural alterations that virtuous people would attempt to pray away. Your comfort level around others with physical differences creates additional suspicion about supernatural networking. Your empathy toward people with disabilities or unusual appearances suggests recognition of shared supernatural status, rather than normal human compassion. Your knowledge about managing physical challenges appears to be supernatural education, rather than personal experience and community support. The seasonal changes that affect everyone's appearance, weight fluctuations, skin color variations, hair texture changes, become interpreted as evidence of your supernatural ability to alter your physical form. Your natural seasonal variations appear to be controlled transformations, rather than normal biological responses to environmental changes. As you carefully arrange your clothing to minimize the visibility of that distinctive scar, while knowing that even your caution about it will be interpreted as suspicious concealment, you understand that even the most basic aspects of physical existence have been transformed into evidence against your humanity. You survey the results of your hard work, the thriving herb garden that feeds your family through winter, the successful brewing business that provides steady income, the reputation for healing that brings grateful patients to your door with payment for your services, and realize with creeping horror that your economic success, this prosperity you've built through skill and dedication, has become the most damning evidence yet against you in medieval Europe. Your ability to support yourself and even accumulate modest wealth without obvious male protection or inherited resources appears impossible through natural means, suggesting you must have made supernatural bargains to achieve such suspicious prosperity. The medieval economy operated on rigid assumptions about who should prosper and how wealth should be acquired, making your success as an independent woman automatically suspect in communities where most people struggled with subsistence living. Your comfortable lifestyle, your ability to purchase goods that others cannot afford, and your financial independence from male relatives suggest supernatural assistance that allows you to bypass the economic limitations that constrain virtuous women. You feel the weight of resentful stares from neighbors whose own economic struggles make your success appear not just unusual, but actively threatening to the natural order. Your prosperity creates a stark contrast with families who barely survive from harvest to harvest, making your wealth appear to come at their expense through supernatural means. Your success suggests you've discovered unfair advantages that other community members cannot access through honest labor. The sources of your income become analyzed for evidence of supernatural enhancement. Your herbal practice succeeds too consistently, suggesting your remedies work through magical rather than natural properties. Your brewing produces ale that sells faster and tastes better than competitors' products, implying supernatural assistance in fermentation and flavoring. Your midwifery practice commands higher fees and better outcomes than other practitioners, indicating demonic help in saving lives and easing births. You discover that your business acumen and practical intelligence appear suspiciously sophisticated for someone of your gender and social background. Your ability to negotiate fair prices, to manage complex transactions, to plan ahead for seasonal variations in supply and demand suggest education or insight that exceeds what normal human learning could provide. Your commercial success implies supernatural guidance in making profitable decisions. Historians still argue whether accusations based on economic success represented genuine belief in supernatural assistance or provided convenient justifications for redistributing wealth from successful individuals to communities struggling with poverty and resource scarcity during difficult economic periods. Your ability to predict market conditions and adjust your business strategies accordingly appears prophetic to observers who don't recognize your careful attention to economic patterns. When you increase herb production before disease outbreaks create higher demand, when you brew extra ale before celebrations require additional supply, or when you stockpile materials before prices rise, your foresight seems supernatural rather than simply good business planning. The quality of your goods consistently exceeds what your competitors produce using similar methods and materials, creating suspicion about the source of your superior results. Your ale never spoils when others' batches go bad, your herbs remain potent longer than normal storage should allow, and your remedies work more effectively than identical preparations made by other healers. Your product quality suggests supernatural enhancement that gives you unfair competitive advantages. You realize that your financial independence allows you to make choices that appear suspicious to communities where economic desperation controls most people's decisions. Your ability to refuse customers you don't trust, to turn down profitable opportunities that seem morally questionable, or to donate services to poor families suggests you don't need money as desperately as normal humans should. Your selective approach to earning income implies supernatural financial security. Your investment strategies and long-term planning appear impossibly sophisticated for someone who should be focused on immediate survival needs. Your practice of saving money for future emergencies, investing in equipment improvements, or planning business expansion suggests supernatural knowledge about future conditions that normal humans cannot predict. Your economic foresight exceeds what natural intelligence should provide. The timing of your financial successes coincides suspiciously with community hardships in ways that suggest supernatural resource redistribution. When crop failures force neighbors to purchase your stored food supplies, when livestock diseases increase demand for your healing services, or when harsh weather creates markets for your specialized products, your prosperity appears to grow directly from others' misfortunes through supernatural manipulation. You can almost taste the bitter irony that your economic success, which should prove your value to the community, instead marks you as a dangerous supernatural threat. Your ability to contribute to the local economy through employment, purchases, and services becomes twisted into evidence that you're extracting resources through evil means rather than creating a legitimate value through honest work. Your generous charitable activities, designed to demonstrate good citizenship and Christian virtue, become reinterpreted as evidence of supernatural guilt. Your donations to poor families suggest you're trying to buy spiritual protection or community silence about your supernatural activities. Your gifts to the church appear to be attempts to corrupt religious authorities or prevent divine punishment for your evil practices. The tools and equipment that support your economic activities appear suspiciously sophisticated for someone of your background. Your well-maintained brewing equipment suggests supernatural assistance in preventing normal wear and breakdown. Your extensive collection of healing tools implies supernatural guidance in acquiring professional resources. Your comfortable living arrangements appear to exceed what natural income should afford. Your ability to weather economic crises that devastate other community members suggests supernatural protection that shields you from natural consequences of market fluctuations, crop failures, or political disruptions. When others lose their savings, struggle to find customers, or face business failures, your continued prosperity appears to violate natural economic laws that should affect everyone equally. Your knowledge of distant market conditions, trade opportunities, and economic trends appears impossibly comprehensive for someone who rarely travels beyond your immediate area. Your understanding of regional price variations, seasonal demand patterns, and long-distance trade relationships suggests supernatural intelligence gathering that normal humans cannot accomplish through conventional means. The contracts and business relationships you maintain seem unusually favorable compared to agreements other community members negotiate. Your suppliers offer better prices, your customers pay more readily, and your business partners provide more advantageous terms than normal commercial relationships should generate. Your networking success implies supernatural influence over other people's business decisions. Your economic resilience during personal crises, maintaining income during illness, rebuilding after accidents, or continuing business during family emergencies suggests supernatural support that protects your financial interests when natural disasters should destroy your prosperity along with everyone else's economic security. Do you remember all that evidence accumulating against you? The physical marks, the independence, the knowledge, the dreams, the success at every endeavor? Now your economic prosperity provides the final piece that medieval prosecutors need to explain how all your other supernatural activities have been funded and supported through demonic contracts that trade your soul for earthly success. As you count the coins that represent months of honest labor, you understand that even financial security, the goal of every hard-working person, has become evidence of supernatural corruption in a world where success itself has become suspicious. You watch in growing horror as your neighbor Maria is dragged away by the witch hunters, her cries of innocence echoing through the village square, and you feel your heart breaking as you realize you cannot speak up in her defense without sealing your own doom. Your natural compassion, your intimate knowledge of Maria's gentle character, and your moral certainty of her innocence compel you to want to testify on her behalf, but in medieval Europe, defending someone accused of witchcraft has become the most dangerous act you could possibly commit, guaranteeing your own immediate accusation and execution. The twisted logic of witch hunting had created a social environment where compassion itself became evidence of supernatural conspiracy. Your willingness to vouch for Maria's character suggests you know her intimately through shared participation in supernatural activities. Your defense of her innocence implies you possess insider knowledge of witchcraft practices that allows you to distinguish between genuine practitioners and innocent victims. Your emotional investment in her fate appears to prove your membership in the same supernatural network. You feel the paralyzing weight of impossible moral choices as you watch Maria's terrified face, searching the crowd for support that no one dares provide. Your silence feels like betrayal of everything decent within your soul, yet speaking would transform you from hidden suspect into active target. Your knowledge of Maria's daily life, her kindness to children, her devotion to her family becomes dangerous intelligence that you cannot safely share without revealing suspicious familiarity with someone now branded as evil. The medieval legal system had developed procedures that made defending accused witches tantamount to confessing supernatural involvement. Your testimony about Maria's good character would be dismissed as either deliberate deception designed to protect a fellow practitioner, or evidence of supernatural influence that made you unable to recognize obvious signs of her corruption. Your personal knowledge of her innocence becomes proof of your own guilt rather than exonerating evidence for her defense. You discover that even your emotional responses to Maria's persecution provide evidence against you. Your visible distress at her arrest suggests personal investment that exceeds normal neighborly concern. Your anger at the accusations implies you're offended by attacks against supernatural practices rather than simply outraged by injustice. Your tears for her suffering appear to be grief for losing a supernatural ally rather than human sympathy for innocent suffering. Historians still argue whether the prohibition against defending accused witches represented calculated strategy to prevent community solidarity against witch-hunting authorities, or genuine belief that supernatural practitioners would naturally support each other through coordinated defensive testimonies. Your relationship with Maria becomes forensically examined for evidence of supernatural connections. Your friendship appears to be a cover for collaborative witchcraft activities. Your shared activities, perhaps brewing together, exchanging recipes, or helping with each other's children, are reinterpreted as joint supernatural practices disguised as innocent cooperation. Your mutual support during difficult times suggests a pact to assist each other through supernatural means. The specific knowledge you possess about Maria's daily habits, her personal struggles, and her private thoughts creates additional evidence of supernatural communication. Your awareness of her financial difficulties suggests you've been consulted about magical solutions to her problems. Your understanding of her family relationships implies she's confided supernatural secrets that innocent neighbors shouldn't know. Your familiarity with her personal business appears to exceed normal social boundaries. You realize that your hesitation to condemn Maria provides as much evidence as active defense would create. Your inability to immediately agree with the accusation suggests you're conflicted about betraying a fellow practitioner rather than simply shocked by false charges against an innocent person. Your measured responses to questions about her character appear to be careful, diplomatic answers designed to protect both her and yourself from supernatural exposure. Your previous interactions with Maria become re-examined through the lens of supernatural suspicion. Times when you visited her cottage appear to be coven meetings rather than social calls. Occasions when you work together on projects are reinterpreted as collaborative spellcasting rather than mutual assistance. Your shared laughter and friendship become evidence of supernatural bonding rather than natural human connection. The gifts you've exchanged with Maria over years of friendship transform into evidence of supernatural commerce. That jar of honey you gave her becomes a magical ingredient. While the herbal remedy she provided for your headaches appears to be supernatural medicine that proves your ongoing supernatural relationship. Your generous exchanges of goods and services suggest mutual support within a supernatural network. You can almost feel how defending Maria would combine with all your existing suspicious characteristics to create an overwhelming case against you. Your herbal knowledge would appear to be specialized expertise that allows you to recognize innocent plant medicine versus actual supernatural practices. Your economic success would seem to be shared prosperity within a supernatural business network. Your physical differences would become matching supernatural markings that identify members of the same demonic alliance. Your silence during Maria's interrogation becomes interpreted as either cowardly abandonment of a supernatural ally or careful strategic withdrawal designed to protect remaining network members. Your visible internal struggle between speaking and staying quiet appears to be conflict between loyalty to supernatural companions and fear of personal exposure rather than moral anguish about witnessing injustice. The information you could provide about Maria's actual activities, her daily routines, her genuine concerns, her real relationships, becomes dangerous knowledge that implies surveillance or intimate cooperation that exceeds normal neighborly awareness. Your detailed understanding of her life suggests either supernatural spying abilities or close collaborative relationship that innocent neighbors wouldn't develop. Your potential testimony about Maria's character would face immediate challenges about the source of your knowledge. How do you know she's never harmed anyone unless you've been present during her supernatural activities? How can you be certain she's innocent unless you understand witchcraft practices well enough to recognize their absence? Your defense becomes self-incrimination regardless of how carefully you construct your arguments. The emotional bond you feel with Maria, that natural human connection built through years of friendship and mutual support, becomes reinterpreted as supernatural linking that connects practitioner souls across physical distance. Your genuine affection for her appears to be evidence of spiritual alliance rather than simple friendship, while your concern for her welfare suggests protective instincts that exceed normal human relationships. Your knowledge of other community members who might support Maria becomes additional evidence of supernatural networking. Your awareness of who else considers her innocence suggests you understand the membership and opinions of a supernatural support network. Your insight into community dynamics implies supernatural intelligence gathering about potential allies and enemies. As you watch Maria disappear into the custody of witch hunters while your silence burns like acid in your throat, you understand that even the most basic human virtues, loyalty, friendship, and moral courage, have been weaponized against you in a system designed to make compassion itself a capital crime. You sit in your cottage as darkness falls, listening to the sounds of the search party gathering into the village square, their torches flickering like malevolent stars as they prepare to come for you. Every single thread of evidence we've woven together throughout this long, terrifying journey has converged into this perfect storm of suspicion that makes your guilt appear absolutely certain to medieval minds seeking supernatural explanations for the inexplicable complexities of human existence. The birthmark that marked you from your first breath, your dangerous independence as a woman living without male protection, your knowledge of healing herbs that work too well to be merely natural. Each piece of evidence seemed manageable alone, but together they've created a web of supernatural proof that tightens around you like a hangman's noose. Your red hair catches the firelight streaming through your window, that genetic accident that medieval minds interpreted as Satan's brand. Or your black cat presses against your leg, seeking comfort while unknowingly providing the final visual confirmation of your supposed demonic allegiances. Do you remember how your left-handedness marked every gesture you made with sinister implications? How your brewing skills transformed life-sustaining work into evidence of magical potion-making? How your survival of the water trial proved your guilt rather than your innocence? Each revelation built upon the last, creating an avalanche of suspicion that no amount of actual evidence could stop or redirect toward truth. Your successful childbearing, which should have marked you as blessed, instead suggested supernatural protection that came at the cost of your soul. Your literacy, that gateway to knowledge and wisdom, became proof of forbidden learning that exceeded what someone like you should possess. Your ability to predict weather patterns, born from generations of careful observation, appeared to be supernatural control over atmospheric forces that could destroy crops and kill livestock. The seizures that racked your body against your will provided compelling evidence of demonic possession, while your habit of talking to yourself during solitary work suggested ongoing conversations with invisible evil companions. Your natural joy in music and dance connected you to pagan traditions that predated Christian authority, while your success as a midwife placed you at the intersection of life and death, where supernatural forces were believed to be most active. Your vivid dreams, those neurological phenomena that every human experiences, became proof of soul travel to supernatural realms, where you participated in demonic sabbaths and received evil instruction. Your physical differences, whether present from birth or acquired through life's normal accidents, are interpreted as visible supernatural markings that proved your body had been claimed and altered by dark forces. Your economic prosperity, achieved through skill and hard work, appeared impossible without supernatural assistance in communities where most people barely survived from harvest to harvest. And finally, your compassionate impulse to defend innocent Maria from false accusations became the ultimate proof of your membership in a supernatural conspiracy that protected its own members through coordinated deception. Historians still argue whether this perfect storm of accumulated suspicion represented genuine religious terror or systematic elimination of non-conforming individuals who threatened established social hierarchies. But tonight, such academic debates offer no comfort as you hear your name being called in the village square below. You understand with crystal clarity that every normal human characteristic you possess has been filtered through the lens of supernatural suspicion, until your entire existence appears to be evidence of otherworldly corruption. Your intelligence became magical wisdom. Your independence became supernatural protection. Your success became demonic assistance. And your compassion became supernatural networking. The torch-bearing crowd approaches your cottage with the confidence of people who believe they're performing holy work by eliminating a dangerous supernatural threat to their community's safety. They've seen the evidence. They've heard the testimony. They've witnessed the patterns that seem to prove beyond reasonable doubt that you represent everything they fear about forces beyond their understanding and control. You realize that you never had a chance to prove your innocence, because innocence itself became suspect in a system designed to find guilt regardless of actual evidence. Every defense you might have offered would have been twisted into additional proof of your supernatural nature. Every explanation would have demonstrated suspicious knowledge. Every denial would have appeared to be supernatural deception. The medieval world created an intellectual trap from which escape was impossible once suspicion focused on your particular combination of characteristics. Being different was dangerous. Being competent was suspicious. Being successful was supernatural. Being compassionate was conspiratorial. The very qualities that should have marked you as valuable to your community instead marked you for destruction. You can almost taste the bitter irony that your persecution represents humanity's fear of its own best qualities. Your healing knowledge, your weather wisdom, your economic success, your literary skills, your reproductive health, your musical joy, these represent human achievements and potential that should be celebrated and preserved. Instead, they've been reinterpreted as evidence of supernatural corruption that must be eliminated to protect community safety. The voices grow closer now, calling your name with the mixture of fear and righteous anger that characterizes people convinced they're confronting ultimate evil. The accumulation of evidence against you has reached critical mass, creating a social avalanche that cannot be stopped by reason, truth, or justice. In these final moments before the inevitable, you understand that your story represents thousands of similar stories throughout medieval Europe. Intelligent, capable, independent people whose very competence and nonconformity made them targets in societies that feared difference and sought supernatural explanations for anything that challenged established hierarchies and conventional wisdom. The tortures reach your door now, and rough voices demand your surrender to face judgment for crimes that exist only in the terrified imagination of communities seeking someone to blame for the uncertainties, hardships, and inexplicable complexities of medieval existence. Your fate was sealed not by any evil you committed, but by the dangerous combination of being different, capable, and visible in an age when such characteristics could literally cost you your life. As the door splinters under their assault and hands reach for you in the flickering torchlight, you carry with you the knowledge that truth and innocence provide no protection against the perfect storm of fear, superstition, and accumulated suspicion that has finally crashed over you with the force of absolute certainty. The medieval world's need for supernatural explanations has found its perfect target in your combination of unusual characteristics, and no amount of actual innocence can compete with the terrifying logic of evidence that seems to prove your guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. Now comes the gentle wind down and the soft transition from terror to peace that will carry listeners safely into sleep. You feel your heartbeat slowing as we step back from this medieval nightmare into the safety of our modern understanding. The witch-hunting fever that once claimed thousands of innocent lives has faded into historical memory, leaving behind lessons about the dangers of fear, the importance of evidence-based reasoning, and the precious value of tolerance for human difference. Tonight's journey through these dark centuries reminds us how fortunate we are to live in times when being different is celebrated rather than feared, when knowledge is valued rather than suspected, when success is admired rather than seen as supernatural. The brave women and men who suffered through these persecutions gave their lives to teach us the importance of protecting the vulnerable. Questioning accusations and celebrating the beautiful diversity of human experience. As you drift towards sleep, let go of the fear and suspicion that once ruled medieval minds. Instead, embrace the knowledge that curiosity is wonderful, that independence is strength, that success is possible through natural means, and that being different makes the world more interesting rather than more dangerous. Rest peacefully, knowing that the dark ages of witch hunting have passed into history, leaving behind a more enlightened world where your unique qualities are treasures rather than threats. Sleep well, knowing that tomorrow you'll wake in a world where healing knowledge saves lives, where weather prediction prevents disasters, where literacy opens doorways to wisdom, and where dreams inspire rather than damn. Sweet dreams await you in safety and peace.